Good morning, everybody. Welcome to Solo ReacTalk. This morning, I'm going to be reacting to a video requested by someone. I did not write, their name in the request sheet. I'm sorry about that. If you know who you are, you can just tell me in the comment section that, hey, it was me. I'm sorry, I didn't write down your name. But yes, I am going to be reacting to the tragic tale of Ferrus Manus, featuring WarriorTier, made on the immersive 40k lore Iron Hands, made on the Amber King YouTube channel. Yes, it's been a long time since last I was here on the Amber King's YouTube channel and reacting to Warhammer 40k content on the channel. I think the last one was Constantine Valdor, if I'm not mistaken. So yeah, it's good to be back. And Ferrus Manus, I don't know anything about this Primarch really. All I know is that he was decapitated by Fulgrim, and he was one of the first Primarchs to die, right? And he died during the Dropsite massacre. That's all I really know about this Primarch. And even his Legion, I don't know much about them. All I know is that yes, they are the 10th Legion, and they always use that saying, the flesh is weak. That's all I know about these guys. So it's going to be good to hear more about Ferrus Manus and his Legion and how he contributed to the Imperium while he was still alive. And yeah, let's see what this is all about. Oh yes, guys, remember, if you want to check out my previous reactions to other Warhammer 40k content created by YouTubers, the link for the playlist is going to be at the top here. Just click on it and you'll be able to access them. If you want to check out the original video as well as the Amber King's YouTube channel, the links are going to be in the description below. Okay, let's start. 3, 2, 1, go.
These are not my hands. I rely on the augmentation given to me by the metal gauntlets, so much so that the flesh beneath them is now little more than a distant memory. A day will come when I will strip it from me, lest I lose the power to master myself forever. The flesh is weak, but deeds endure.
The flesh is weak, but deeds endure. Okay.
Rest. We were not made to rest. We go on, unflinching, unstoppable, unending in our strength. The Emperor did not make us for such mortal concerns as hearth and home, vanity, or contemplation. We are his engines of war, his hammers, beating out the fabric of existence into a vessel fit for mankind to inhabit.
The Iron Hands are not saviors, nor should we be. A man who cannot save himself is weak, and the weak do not deserve to be saved. For such a man, only death is fitting. This we can provide. The flesh is weak, sickness, injury, mental anguish, all failings of our mortal coil. Oh, the pride and projected strength of humanity, how we seek to protect ourselves from the truth of the fragility of our existence, the event horizon that is our death. But where the flesh fails, withers and rots, iron can replace that pillar, immutable, powerful, an augmentation for our weakness. A journey walked by the 10th son, the Gorgon of Medusa, the Primarch Ferrus Manus, father to a legion whose very identity encompassed his own inner struggle on the path towards strength, and the ambition to grasp it all under the crushing embrace of an iron fist. To the 40th millennium, the sons of the Gorgon entice fear within humanity. The image of the union between the blessings of the Emperor of mankind and the Omnissiah. But who are the Iron Hands? Who was Ferrus Manus, the Gorgon of Medusa? Their story begins in the 30th millennium. Terra, the cradle of mankind, scarred and damaged by the very actions our species had inflicted upon it for millennia. But despair and death was not its destiny. From the horrors of the age of strife, the millennia of darkness and rampant madness, we had survived. In the Himalayan mountains lay a fortress, a palace. Within, the foundations of an empire that would spread to the stars. A child, vulnerable and weak, lay inside a gestation capsule, growing, destined to become something more than human.
Before we continue, I just wanted to ask about this image here of the throne room. Is this how they depict the throne room to look like in the Warhammer 40k books? Is this how they describe the throne room of the Imperial Palace? I'm just wondering, because it's cool. I really do like this, like the pyramid step with the top, the Emperor sitting on top with his golden throne, and you know, this entire procession of, I think they're custodians there. I'm not entirely sure, I think so. And you know, a lot of people going up the steps, going towards the Emperor. I wonder what's going on in this image, because I'm not entirely sure, but it's cool, really. It's an amazing image. Hopefully it is like a depiction of how, you know, the throne room looks like. And yeah, definitely it's amazing. Okay, let's continue on with the story.
A future under the tutelage and training of a man that would unite the lost colonies of mankind. But that future never came to pass. The gestation capsule was torn from the ground, cast into the sentient realm of madness, the warp. Claws scraped upon the glass and ceramite, as creatures of nightmare desperately tried to get in. The capsule with its treasure inside tossed and turned within the warp, finally spit back into real space, in segmentum obscurus, hurtling towards a planet in the Thule sector. The capsule began to heat up, the edges searing as it collided with the atmosphere, and with a thunderous clap it crashed onto the surface of this strange world. Amongst smoke and fire, a child emerged, his survival proof that he was more than a mortal man. Air filled his lungs. He took his first steps feeling the dust and smooth dark stone underneath his feet. It was upon Karashi, the ice pinnacle, the largest mountain upon this world, where he had landed, but yet no light met his eyes, as the gloom of a dark chamber surrounded him. He was inside the mountain, locked deep inside a chamber which his capsule had punched into. No panic crossed his mind, only confusion and the desire for information. Upon the remains of his gestation capsule, he discovered a mark, an X, a symbol, a name. His name. He did not know. The child began to venture out,
Number 10.
exploring further, seeing through the minimal light with eyes that were beyond human. Shapes and structures that were too precise, too clean to be natural. He saw runes. All around him was carved, orderly dark stone and electroconductive stalagmites dotting the walls and ceiling. He did not know where he was. He did not know who he was. But he knew what he saw was wrong. It was alien.
Alien? Could it be like could it be a facility built by the Necron? Or is it just another Xeno race that created this facility underground? Huh.
But he was drawn to it. Like a part of him yearned for the understanding beneath, feeling it resonate within his core. But something was wrong. From the corner of his eye he saw it, a beast slither out from the chamber. It was enormous, a silver body with segmented plates and sharp talons that gleamed even in the darkness of the cave.
Okay, so it's not Necron. Yeah, there's something else. Okay.
A biomechanical frame that moved with the grace and venom of a beast, thrashing violently as if it awakened from a deep slumber. The child immediately attacked it, each primitive lunge or strike, leaving not even a single mark upon the beast as it slithered out of the chamber. What had he done? What had he released? The thought racing through his mind. But worst of all, he couldn't stop it. I was weak. The thought.
You were a child. Of course you were weak. You were just born a few seconds ago, a few moments ago. So of course you don't have the strength to defeat this entity. And I don't think I heard the Amber King stating that this creature threatened the child. Like it was about to attack him, or it was about to lunge at him, or do something. It's Ferrus Manus who attacked first. It's Ferrus Manus who perceived it as a threat, even though it has not displayed anything worthy of a threat. So who's the bad guy in this situation? Who's the bad guy in this situation?
Ran cold in his mind. Following the path of the beast, the superhuman child crawled his way to the surface, dust and soot under his fingertips. For the first time he looked out towards the vista before him, a world of grey skies. Mountains of black stone and withered life stared back. Medusa, a world that still showed the scars of relentless mining from humanity in prior millennia. Gutted of nearly all of its precious metals and minerals, life itself was muted, as if the colour and vigour had been purged from it. All of this was taken in by eyes the colour of dull silver, upon Karashi, the ice pinnacle. Shapes in the distance caught his gaze, silhouettes that looked like his own, but smaller. Others like him. Humans. No, he told himself. His path lay with the beast he had just unleashed. The creature that had bested him. The one that had shown him how weak he was. He was curious, but how could he present himself to others like this, without even knowing the concept? The boy made an oath, a singular purpose. He would slay the silver beast. The Shadowlands, a place even darker and harsher than base Medusa, is where the boy strode.
You know, the Primarch is just like the rest of his brothers, you know, like clockwork. As soon as they wake up, they assess their landscape, and then they perceive targets that need to be destroyed or consumed. and you know, they start devising weapons. I'm just thinking about Perturabo, you know, how he also woke up, he saw Olympia, he saw that there was some, you know, creatures out there that could possibly kill him. So then he started making weapons that you could use to destroy them. Probably Ferrus Manus is probably going to do the same thing to destroy this creature that he's after. So yeah, you know, like clockwork. As soon as you wake up, assess, create weapons, fight, kill, conquer.
Creatures and beasts of nightmare stalked this unforgiving place. And as the child began to grow, at an unnatural speed, he hunted them. He was simply one more monster in the mosh pit. One by one they fell. Monsters of tooth, scale and fang, under the tally of the child from the sky. Each battle, each near-death experience, evolving him. From his own mind he forged tools and weapons, the knowledge and skill innate to him, as if it was in his very blood. He bested a storm giant in a feat of strength, and he scaled once again Karashi, the ice pinnacle, with his bare hand. He swam deeper than the horned behemoth of the Suferian Sea, all of it accumulating into a being of strength, a hunter, one with a singular purpose of testing himself, improving himself constantly. A man who cannot save himself is weak, and the weak do not deserve to be saved. All questions of who he was, why he was here on the strange world, was buried. It was that silver beast, the one that he had been too weak to destroy, that plagued him. The great silver worm, Asirnoth. After years of battle and improvement, the now young man finally set his sights upon the beast that had almost killed him. He stalked it for days, hunting it across the land until he finally caught it. The battle had begun. He threw himself at it, striking it with fists, but even then he couldn't make a dent. Upon land and sea the two fought bitterly, all of the young man's equipment forged by his own hand, breaking. Even his own body was pushed to the limits, as a monster of flesh fought one of metal. In a valley flooded by volcanic magma, the young man lifted the enormous silver worm into the air above his head, and then plunged it into the flow. His arms were burning. The pain was excruciating, but still he held it as it thrashed. He held it below the magma until it melted, and when he removed his hands, they were coated in the living metal of the beast.
Are you telling me that the Primarchs can also withstand the heat from a lava flow? Meaning they could just walk into a lava, river or something, and they'll be fine. Yes, they'll be burnt, like the skin will probably be burnt, but still they'll be fine. They'll be able to regenerate almost immediately. Wow.
It was flexible, like flesh, yet as hard as any metal he had ever seen. Like from all he had hunted before, he had taken the lessons of strength and bound it to him. But Asirnoth, his greatest enemy, his purpose for living was bound to him forever. Emerging from the Shadowlands, the humans of this world saw an enormous figure, clad in rudimentary armor. The humans of this world had seen sightings over the years, spreading the rumor of the hunter in the mountains. What stood before them was more than a man, a being with a face that was stern and brutal, as if it had been carved from stone itself. A man with iron hands.
I think it's the only Primarch that I know of that has got an augmentation before joining the Imperium of Man, I think it's the only one. I'm just thinking about anyone else who has some sort of added advantage. Oh, wait a minute. Angron had his butcher nails, although I wouldn't necessarily say it's an advantage for him. That technology is just messed up. But yeah, I think Ferrus is the only one with a clear advantage compared to the rest of his brothers. I mean, if he has living metal arms, he doesn't have to use swords anymore. He can just use his arms as his protective shield or as his physical melee contact battle weapons, if I can say that. So yeah, it's quite interesting that he has these metal arms, compared to the rest of his brothers who don't necessarily have anything. They just have the armor that's been given to them by the Imperium of Man. Yeah, Ferrus is different. Nice.
The techno-barbarian tribes of Medusa would find a new apex predator, a man who would bind them all to his will, a man they would call Ferrus Manus. He was clad in tattered chainmail, strung with a harness of saw-edged Medusan steel. Blood streamed down from his trembling hands as he forced himself to rise. Before him stood a warrior in gold. He was the light, pulsating energy. He was sovereignty personified. His armor was masterful. The craftsmanship perfect. He was so far above him. They had fought for days, Ferrus giving every ounce of strength he had.
They fought? The Emperor and Ferrus fought? Wow. How did they come to that decision? You know, where the Emperor was like, "Hi, son," and then Ferrus is like, "I'm going to fight you, and you're going to agree to it." And they fought. Like, that's interesting.
But it was nothing compared to the being before him. He was looking upon the most incredible and horrifying thing he had ever seen. His creator, his father, the Emperor of mankind. Ferrus Manus. It was the name given to him by the people of Medusa. He had no need for a name. Perhaps the X on his gestation pod was it. But the man with iron hands had become more fitting. The techno-barbarian tribes of Medusa, roaming around this barren black and grey planet, in fortified land crawlers from a more enlightened age. If the shifting landscape, violent eruptions and swelling seas were not enough, the constant inter-clan strife made for a brutal existence. The people of Medusa were a harsh, stubborn and ambitious people, their rugged features matching the hearts within. One by one they were challenged by the man with metal arms. Each battle a test, as Ferrus had been tested before, until all of the clans across Medusa were brought unto his iron fist. Atraxi, Burkhar, Thelg, Carduran, Lokopt, Morgul, Ungvar, Vorganan, Sorgal, Averni, Garsik, and Karlgul.
Guys, look at those arms. Oh, that is cool. That is cool.
It was an overlord ship created from violence, but also mutual benefit. The Iron Fathers, the half-man, half-machine, spiritual leaders of the people of Medusa for millennia, bargained their own long-kept secrets and technology for the brilliance locked within Ferrus. They had tried their best to kill him many times, but even they were brought into an agreement that mutually added to each other's strength. With the people of Medusa under his sway, Ferrus also led the bravest of the warrior clans to delve into the frozen realms, breaking open long-sealed vaults and salvaging the majesties of technology from humanity's golden past.
Were there any STCs?
But the era of Ferrus's rule was not just of expansion and innovation. War never ceased upon Medusa. Battle had made Ferrus strong. It had made the people of Medusa weed out the weak. And so conflict between the clans continued, all under the watchful dull silver eyes of the demigod silver-armed man, seeing the life and death struggle as a whetstone to steel. Each piece of technology discovered, the people of Medusa looked on in awe, as Ferrus seemed to unravel its intricacies with just a look, like the blueprints were etched onto his mind. He did not know why.
To me, it seems like Perturabo and Ferrus are quite similar, you know? Perturabo also has all this vast knowledge in his mind, where he can just access it and do whatever he wants to do, in terms of making technology or weaponry systems or stuff like that. And here is Ferrus also capable of doing the same thing, where he just looks at a particular form of technology and he already knows what it's made out of, how it works, what are the power requirements, you know. Interesting.
But Ferrus felt the process of dissection and understanding always well up. It was innate, like recalling a memory you did not know you had forgotten. It was decades of battle, self-improvement, ruling, forging, and then innovation, all accumulating to the day a golden eagled stormbird descended from the sky. a being of golden light strode forth, too beautiful a form for a world like this. The Emperor of mankind, his creator, his father, had come. Ferrus had known all along he was different, someone like this world and its people, an outsider in his heart, and now the answers had come. He was utterly outmatched. It was like when he was a child, pounding on the metal of a Xehanov's body. His best was nothing compared to this being.
The Emperor would never allow you to be better than him. You are his tool. He made sure. He put security measures making sure that the Primarchs would never be able to challenge him. Unless, of course, you are Horus and you've been infused with the Chaos Gods. Then it's a different matter altogether. But essentially, the Emperor made sure that, yes, you will be my generals, and yes, you will conquer the galaxy, but no, you will not reach my level. The son will not take over the father, because the father wants to live forever. He wants to do things his way. He wants to make sure that his plans come into fruition. He doesn't believe in handing the baton to the next generation. That doesn't work with him. It's his way or the highway.
Broken and bloodied, Ferrus submitted to his father, the Emperor of mankind. It had been missing for years. A goal, a target, a singular purpose, a challenge, a new Asirnoth to push himself forward, to build his strength. And there he stood, a being so perfect, because it was purged of all weaknesses. The ideal, the end of the path he walked. Submitting to the strength of the Emperor, Ferrus found that his horizons would take another hit, as his gaze was dragged from Medusa and turned towards the stars.
Ferrus, the Emperor is a bad example for you. Even if you purge all your weaknesses, you're still going to be weak. You're still going to have weaknesses that you don't know that you have. Just like the Emperor. You think he does not have any weaknesses. This man is so weak to his own ambitions that they literally consume him. He is weak in that respect. And seeing him as a goal for you to achieve, it's a mistake on your part. You will never attain it. You will never reach it, because it's also an illusion. You need to think about improving yourself, but not seeing others as a goal to reach. Don't look at others. Just think about yourself. Think about how you're going to improve yourself. And also, pursuing perfection is a mistake. You're just going to continue trying to be perfect no matter what, and it will blind you to what you could become as a person. Yeah. Anyways.
The Imperium of mankind, the empire born upon terror, that sought to bring truth and enlightenment to the lost colonies of mankind. Humanity had suffered the age of strife, an old night, but one singular being would not let us slip into decay and ruin. Once again, humanity would achieve a golden era and mastery over the universe, the Great Crusade. But for such a grand vision, it needed warriors, it needed generals, it needed Ferrus. Perhaps in his heart he'd always known he was created for war. The thrill of battle, of testing yourself against worthy foes, he was made for this. The Storm Walkers, the Adeptus Astartes, superhuman warriors created from the gene seed of Ferrus himself. Sons to him, as he was a son to the Emperor. a legion of warriors that would be his. But before that, he had to be trained to fight amongst the stars. Under the direct tutelage of the Emperor, Ferrus was gifted with arms, technology, knowledge, military doctrine, the best the Imperium had to offer. It was upon Terra, the world of his origin, where he had returned, decades after he had been cast adrift. Now it was the bustling heart of a growing empire. Beneath Mount Narodinia, inside the greatest forges of the Urals, Ferrus created and birthed new wonders, and creations alongside the Forge Masters who had once served the Terrawat clan. All were astounded by the Primarch's innate understanding and brilliance of his technological mind, and the miraculous shaping wrought by his metallic hands. But Ferrus was not alone now in that category of the extraordinary. There were others like him, other Primarchs, his brothers. The first he had met, Horus, first found son of the Emperor. Again a tang hit him. The Emperor was so far above him that it seemed like an impossible mountain to climb to his level. But here stood a brother, an equal, a still unnerving feeling for one who had become the apex predator of his world. He was not sure he could ever quite accept it. But here in the forges of the Ural, he met another, a face of porcelain, with long silver-white hair, a slim physique that resembled a dancer's grace. His face was a thing of beauty, as if it had been cut from marble. The Primarch Fulgrim.
This definitely looks like Fulgrim, you know, with the purple cloth and the claws, and you know how he's just like that definitely looks like Fulgrim right there.
It was as if he was his opposite in every way, the beauty and the beast. His brother had come to the forges, proclaiming he would craft the most perfect weapon ever made, a boast that Ferrus could not let go unchallenged. Stripping to their waist, the two brothers began their first duel. For weeks, the two demigods toiled at the forges, the sight living mythology to those who gazed upon it. Banter and jibs were traded, as often as hammer met anvil, bells ringing to the toll of challenge. Each looked upon each other, each pushed more and more to outdo the other. For 3 months they toiled. The brothers told each other everything of their story, their ideals, their philosophy, their mutual pursuit of perfection, of expunging weakness. Finally, after endless toil, Ferrus looked upon his work, a master-crafted, keen-edged blade, filled with the fire that his arms knew fondly. Fire blade. In the hands of Fulgrim, a hammer of perfect weight, proportion and form. The brothers smiled and laughed, truly, both in awe of each other's pieces, declaring the other's work was greater, a rare display of humility, and without a word, they gifted their perfect weapons to each other.
You can never go wrong with Scott Berkeley music. You can never go wrong with Scott's music. You can't. The Ember King knows this. I mean, the soundtrack suits so well with what the Ember King is saying right now. I'm enjoying this. I wish Petarabo was here too, you know, so we could have this contest between the three of them. Petarabo, Fulgrim, and Ferrus. Although I think Petarabo is going to be a bit jealous or a bit angry that, you know, he couldn't really beat his brothers in terms of making something, because he does tend to, how should I say, he doesn't like to lose, and he doesn't like to share the spoils of winning, if I can say that. Yeah. So I don't know if he'd really be happy, you know, but I just wish that they were here, all three of them doing it. And definitely these were happier times. Happier times. Too bad. So sad.
pact of brotherhood and friendship to last until the stars faded. He was his first friend, Fulgrim. All he had known was battle and the fires of the forge. But now Ferrus knew brotherhood. He was not alone in this universe. It would be with Forgebreaker hefted upon his shoulder, with the promise to purge weakness and pursue perfection, that Ferrus would do battle amongst the stars.
So this is the hammer that Fulgrim created. Okay.
Across numerous battlefields, against horrifying Xenos and non-compliant colonies of mankind, the Primarch of Medusa battled under the direct tutelage of the Emperor until finally he was ready to become the general he was born to be. Returning to Medusa, the 10th Legion, the Storm Giants were remade. Swelling the ranks with the people of Medusa, Ferrus remolded his legion. The clan system of Medusa was integrated into the 10th, autonomous cells unified by one apex, Ferrus. Again, the rivalries of Medusa were encouraged. Less open warfare, but competition, and each of them specialized in their own way, each on a different path to expunge the weakness within themselves, and bring a unique strength to Ferrus's armory. The Terran-born Astartes were adopted into the Medusan clans, a symbol of unity and submission to the creed of Ferrus. The 10th Legion, clad in forged black armor, set out to the stars, ready to join the Great Crusade. Ferrus had conquered a world, and now he would conquer the galaxy, at the head of a legion of his sons, his warriors, his iron hands.
The 10th Legion, Iron Hands.
The flesh is weak. Eradication of the weak is all that will prevent humanity's backslide towards heresy and extinction. And like necrotized flesh, it must be expunged.
Definitely you guys and, or should I say the Iron Hands and the Mechanicus of Mars, they are together. Ideologically, they are together. Yeah.
Mutated. Replaced by the strength of iron.
And do my brothers not suffer in similar adverse conditions? Or are they somehow able to overcome such deliberations?
Ferrus pressed.
I do not know, my lord.
The Primarch grunted and addressed Santar.
Do you concur with your fellow captain?
I am as frustrated as you, my Primarch.
Ferrus's eyes narrowed to silver slits before he turned his back to regard a broad stratagem table that had manifested in the wake of the hololith.
I doubt that.
He muttered. He passed a shimmering silver hand across the geographical representation of the desert continent to magnify the view projected across the glass slate. Several potential node locations were identified by flashing beacons as well as 2 further markings, a red and green dotted line.
But it fails to answer why we are so far behind,
said Ferrus, glaring at the red line, as if doing so would will it further across the map. Unsurprisingly, it did not.
My lord, if I may,
Desan began, and Santar groaned inwardly, for he knew the mistake his fellow captain had made, even before he'd made it.
Perhaps there is more slowing our efforts than merely sun and sand.
Speak plainly, brother captain.
Sorcery, my lord. I can put it no plainer than that.
Our efforts are thwarted by Eldar witches. Is that your best excuse for failure?
His silvered fist clenched at the edge of the stratagem table, birthing a web of cracks that would have riven the landscape with the catastrophic earthquakes.
I mean, Eldar are no pushovers. Ferrus, you should know this. They're no pushovers. And it will take some time to figure out how to defeat them. So I think the captain is just, stating that we're dealing with a very powerful race. It's not easy. It's not like cutting down human beings.
They've been real. Istvaan felt the imagined tectonic ruptures all the way up his spine.
It would explain why our efforts have thus far.
Ferrus Manus' fist slammed against the map, arresting the floundering captain's words. The resulting split almost broke it in two.
I am not interested,
He said, and it was as if the air in the stark chamber grew colder, cold enough to burn. The Primarch folded his arms. Fathomless silver pooled across his immense biceps, shimmering and refugent. Istvaan, who had seldom been this close to his lord for so long, found his sight drawn to them.
Do you know how I came by this magnificent aberration?
Asked Ferrus, noting the captain's interest. Istvaan hid his confusion at the line of questioning well. Like most exceptional beings, Primarchs were occasionally inscrutable.
Have you heard of my deeds? Of how I bested a storm giant in a feat of strength? Or how I scaled Karashi, the ice pinnacle, with my bare hands?
I mean, if he is an Astartes that hails from Medusa, then I'm sure he knows of your exploits and your victories on Medusa. But if he is an Astartes from Terra, then yeah, probably he wouldn't know.
Or perhaps you are familiar with the day when I swam deeper than the horned behemoth of the Super-Huron Sea. Do you know these stories?
Istvaan's reply was not much louder than a whisper.
I have heard the great sagas, sire.
Ferrus wagged a finger, lost in monologue, and nodding sagely, as if he'd just come upon the answer to his own conundrum.
No, it was a Cyrnoth. He was called Silverwind and the greatest of the ancient drakes. No blade could pierce his metal skin. No spear or lance that I possessed.
He paused, as if reminiscing.
I burned it. Held its writhing body beneath the lava flows of Medusa until it was dead. And when I withdrew my hands, they were...
He held out both his arms.
Like this. Or so the saga speakers would say.
My lord.
Santar wanted to intervene, but a lesson was being imparted. The tale was simply that, a story crafted by bards and the tribal orators of the clans, as related in the canticles or travels. It was told differently every time the first captain had heard it. No iron hands could claim its veracy, for none had been present during the lightless days of the Primarch's arrival on Medusa.
The first captain is Centaur, right? Okay.
Only Ferrus Manus himself knew the truth, and he kept that inside the locked cage of his memories.
Do you believe such a warrior would allow himself to be undone by witchcraft? Do you believe he could be so weak?
He asked. Istvaan was shaking his head, trying to atone for a transgression he did not fully understand.
It is not about weakness. It is simply that your opponent is very difficult to beat. It's not about weakness, Ferrus. You know, you have to be patient. You have to figure out how to unlock this puzzle. Bashing your head with it, being frustrated, is not going to help. Your opponent is that strong. You have to be patient. You have to figure out how to defeat them. It's not a simple matter of you're weak or you're not weak. But anyways, you know, you're obsessed with this notion.
No, sire.
Get out!
The words escaped Ferrus's lips in a rasp.
Before I throw you out.
Istvaan saluted and turned on his heel. Santar was about to join him when Ferrus stopped him.
Not you, First Captain.
Santar stood his ground and straightened his back.
Have I raised weak sons?
Ferrus asked when they were alone again.
You know that is not the case.
Then why are we confounded?
The Primarch's collar cooled as he took to pacing his ruined stratagem.
I've been away from the war front too long. My brother's draining my attention. You have become malleable, tractable. I perceive a weakness of purpose in our ranks, a failing of will that holds us back from our objective. Eldar sorcery is not my concern. Finding and destroying the node is... We should have the mental fortitude to overcome tricks. I am leading this campaign and I will not be bested by my brothers. We are strength, an example to all. The reputation of this legion, my reputation, will not be besmirched. No more delays. We press on at speed. Leave the army divisions behind if you must. Nothing must prevent us achieving victory.
Santar frowned as he saw resolve turn to melancholy on Ferrus's face.
So, you're willing to sacrifice others to make sure that this mission is a success, Ferrus? Hey, that's a sign of weakness in my book. The fact is that you are so headstrong in trying to claim victory, claim some sort of notoriety for your legion, no matter the cost. It's a sign of weakness right there. You want that improvement. You want to be known. You want to have that sort of respect from others, when you should be focusing on getting that type of respect from yourselves as the 10th Legion. You know, those who fight with you, whether they're normal human beings or it's the Astartes. You know, first get that form of strength and respect, instead of looking to other people, your brothers and their legions, and how their exploits are being broadcast across the galaxy. Stop doing that. Yeah, you kind of remind me of Perturabo in some way. Yeah.
Desan serves you unshakably, as we all do. You have forged strong sons, my Primarch.
Ferrus relented. His hand was heavy and crushing as it fell upon the equerry's shoulder.
You make me temperate, Gabriel. I suspect you are the only one who can.
Santal bowed his head respectfully.
You honor me with your praise, my Primarch.
It was well earned, my son.
Ferrus released him, leaving the shoulder numb beneath the guard.
Dessen is a good soldier.
I shall tell him you said so.
No, I'll do it. Better come from me.
As you wish, my Primarch.
There was a long pause as Santal considered what he was about to say next. Ferrus had his back to him again.
Voice your concerns. My eyes might be cold, but they are not blind.
Very well. Is it wise to abandon our auxiliaries? We might have need of their support.
Ferrus's head came around to regard his first captain swiftly. The Primarch's calm demeanor scorched to ash as something molten and unpredictable burned in his gaze.
Are you questioning my orders, Equerry?
Unlike his less experienced captain, Santar did not falter.
No, Primarch, but you do not seem yourself.
Anyone but Santar would have been struck for speaking so candidly. As it was, the first captain experienced a moment of disquiet as his Primarch considered his reaction. Santar's fists were clenched, the lightning claws poised for release as his warrior instincts took over. Ferrus's fury ebbed as quickly as it had flared, and he stared into the darkness.
There's something I need to tell you, Gabriel.
Ferrus met the first captain's gaze.
It is for you and only you to know, but I must confess it, and I warn you, speak this to no one.
An implicit threat lurked at the periphery of the Primarch's trailing words, and a nerve of tremor in Ferrus's jaw flickered. The first captain waited patiently.
I've had strange dreams of late.
Ferrus muttered. It was utterly unlike him to do so, and set Santar on edge more than any threat of violence ever could.
Of a desert of black sand, and of eyes watching. Cold, reptilian eyes.
Santar had no response. He had never seen his Primarch vulnerable before. Ever.
Should I summon an apothecary, my lord?
He eventually asked when he noticed Ferrus rubbing his neck. Under the gorget, just visible above the lip, the skin was raw.
An irritation, nothing more. It is this place, this desert. There is something out there.
Now Santar felt real concern and wanted to end the campaign in short order and venture to fresh theatres of war.
The Legion can destroy the node unassisted. Flesh is weak, my Primarch, but we shall not be slaves to it.
And like a shadow moving from across the sun, Ferrus brightened and became his old self again. He clasped Santar's shoulder in a grip that was painful for the first captain.
Muster the legionary captains. I will lead us to our enemies and show them how strong the sons of Medusa are. My course is set, Aquari. Nothing will stop me, nothing.
With Gabriel Santar gone, Ferrus returns to introspection. Nothing, not even the promise of battle, could shake his bleak mood. Like an anvil hung around his neck, it dragged him deeper towards an abyss. Fulgrim could lighten it, he was sure. But then the Phoenician was not here.
Is Ferrus experiencing some sort of like future sight? I'm not sure if he can see into the future like his other brothers who can, but maybe he can feel the future. Maybe he feels his head being chopped off, and maybe that's why, he feels so uneasy about this place. I don't know. It's just strange that he would feel something around his neck, and he would feel, he would see snake eyes. Or I don't know if Fulgrim had snake eyes during the Dropside massacre. I'm not entirely sure about that. I know he's slowly transformed into a demon of Slaanesh, right? And he is like a serpent. So probably, yes, he already sensed that future that, someone with snake eyes is going to chop off my head. Interesting. Okay.
You are all my sons, and the fires of the forge burn as hot in your hearts as they do in mine. Chain them, master them, and you shall wield a deadly weapon. But allow them to rule you, and you shall be lost. The flesh is weak. A battle cry that had been screamed raw from the throats of their iron hands across thousands of worlds in the galaxy. To be warriors in the Great Crusade was a duty and path that required the Iron Hands to become the perfect warriors. And a perfect warrior was one who had expunged all weaknesses from him. Ferrus knew this. Rather than join humanity on Medusa, he had turned to the Shadowlands, seeking to purge himself of weakness by battle and survival. He hated weakness. It had no place in the utopia he and the Emperor was building.
And thus that utopia will be built on fallacy. You can't just build everything on strength. There has to be a balance. Weakness cannot cease to exist because you demand it to cease to exist. It's not going to happen that way. This pursuit for this perfection is also, like I've said before, it's an illusion. You will never obtain it. Stop hating on weakness. Understand weakness. Try to morph weakness into another strength. Stop seeing it as an enemy. You'll only cause great suffering and pain to yourself. The delusion thinking that strength is the only path, the only way, it won't help you. Anyways.
Weak made mistakes. The weak failed and died. A creed passed on to his sons, who despised weakness with equal zeal, as they crafted themselves into stronger, wiser, and greater warriors. But on that very journey to purge oneself of weakness, there was a roadblock. A weakness they couldn't overcome. Their flesh. Flesh withered. Flesh was susceptible to disease and injury. Flesh tires and fails. The flesh is weak. The Legion looked to their Primarch and saw his arms, the shining metallic beacon of strength, a badge of honor as the corpse of a Xehanort coated his own flesh. Hands that could mold and forge without the heat of flame. so when their flesh failed them, they replaced it with something more reliable, something that wouldn't get sick or decay. Augmetics. Iron. And like necrotized flesh, it must be expunged, amputated, replaced by the strength of iron.
These guys willingly cut off their arms and put on some robotic metallic arms. Really? They love their Primarch so much. They really want to be like him. They aspire to be like him no matter what. You know, even if it sounds illogical, because this is illogical. You have a perfectly good working arm. I'll understand if it was destroyed during battle. You know, then yes, they'll replace you with a metallic arm. But to do it when your body is still fine, that's crazy, guys. That's like the world eaters of Angron. You know, how they also willingly, you know, they wanted to be closer to their Primarch, so yeah, you know, they put in the nails into their skull as well, so that they could become closer to their Primarch. Or what's his name again? Rogel Dorn and his Legion with the pain glove. Like, really, they just want to be so close to their Primarchs, they're willing to do anything to make sure that they emulate their Primarchs no matter what. It's quite interesting.
Bionic hands became common amongst the Legion as the decades passed in the Great Crusade. A part of Ferrus approved of his son's dedication to the eradication of weakness, but yet a part of him despised it. Were these augmetics their own strength, or the strength of a machine? Could it be truly called theirs? But what could he say? His own arms were not his. They were not his hands. He knew deep down that he wielded the strength of something else, but he would never dare voice this display of weakness to a legion that required him to be a symbol, an inspiration. Iron did not bend, so nor could he. Some had even questioned why the lines on the metal at his shoulders was so clean, almost like it had been dipped, rather than plunging a thrashing beast. But the truth would only be known to Ferrus. Launching with a 52nd expedition, Ferrus and the Iron Hands Legion continued to battle across the stars, as more worlds and colonies of mankind were brought into the Imperial fold. The mortal humans of the Imperium would turn to see these enormous warriors clad in cold black armor. To see them fight was akin to watching living myth as demigods strode across the field of battle. Ferrus and his legion's strength, a skill that they had sharpened like a whetstone to a blade, crushed the enemies of the Imperium. The decisive hammer strike. In an alliance closer than any other legion, the Iron Hands and Mechanicum of Mars fielded the greatest equipment and artillery the Imperium possessed. Battles that would have cost millions of lives were spared, as Ferrus and his Iron Hands projected the strength of more than tenfold their number. Their very strength spared lives. The Great Crusade had earned Ferrus honor and victory, experience to add to his self-craft of the perfect warrior, the perfect legion. But something gnawed upon him as the Great Crusade progressed. His brothers, his equals, his rivals. Learning of his father had humbled him, but learning of his brothers motivated him. At the dawning years of the Great Crusade, Ferrus had been found before many of his brothers. There had been a time when there were few Primarchs, but after decades more and more of his brothers were rediscovered. Each of them raised upon different worlds, and masters of their own different creeds. There were those he admired: Fulgrim, Guilliman, and Vulcan. Fulgrim, a true friend, and a brother to walk down the path of perfection with. The one who gave him the nickname he cherished so dearly, the Gorgon. Guilliman, a master of a skill that had been alien to those of Medusa, diplomacy. But beneath that visage lay a ruthless mathematician and bureaucrat. the makings of not just a conqueror, but a ruler too. Vulcan, like him, raised upon a world of fire and smoke, both masters of the forge and craftsmanship, but unlike Ferrus, his brother's core was molten, kind-hearted, where his was iron.
It should have been Fulgrim, Vulcan, Perturabo, and Ferrus. Making a competition on who can make the best weapon. Yeah. It would have been cool. The similarities and the opposites of the brothers is also quite interesting. I'm thinking about, what was his name again? Corvus Corax and Conrad Kurz, how they are also quite similar but also different. Just like with Vulcan and Ferrus. Quite similar but also different in terms of personality. Yeah, interesting.
Again, that feeling came to him. The one he dared not admit to himself. That he was no longer special. No longer the strongest in the room. A feeling that at times motivated him, and at other times a crutch. Decades into the Great Crusade, the campaign on 1544 was not going well. Ferrus, alongside his brothers Vulcan and Mortarion, found himself and his legion struggling. Foul Xenos, the Eldari, that vile ancient race who didn't have the sense to bow down to the rise of mankind. Upon the desert plains, Ferrus, Disan, Shadrach Medusan, Amadeus Duquesne, Gabriel Santire, Bion Henricos, and the Iron Hands fought. A slow, steady wave of iron and bolter versus the swift venom strikes of the Eldari. It boiled his blood to see how he and his legion were hampered, whilst his brothers seemingly performed better. Had he raised weak sons? His temper, the heat of the forge, always something kept at bay by his will of iron, faltered. He raised his voice as a hint of Disan's suggestion that the great Ferrus Manus was thwarted by Eldari witchery. He was not himself. His quickness to anger was far above his usual demeanour. Only Fulgrim was capable of lightening his mood, but his brother was far from him. Alone with his first captain, Gabriel Santar, Ferrus confessed, "I have had strange dreams of late, of a desert of black sand, and of eyes watching, cold, reptilian eyes." Something had been toying with him, but he dared not appear so weak in front of his entire legion. Or worst of all, his brothers. It was his weakness, the weakness of a human. The flesh was truly weak. Taking to the surface personally, Ferrus and his sons plunged into the Eldari's desert stronghold, leaving behind the mortal Imperial contingents, too slow and hampered by the desert conditions. Again, the flesh had been proven weak. The foul Xenos had been waiting for them, ambushing Ferrus and his forces, clad in coal-black armor, with a face hewn from granite, cold fury radiating from his every pore. Ferrus battled the Eldari, but he became isolated, cut off. A storm of psychic origin tore through the Iron Hands, creating a barrier from them and their Primarch.
But you see, this is his issue. It's another weakness, where he's so bent on proving the strength of his legion, the strength of himself as a Primarch, that he's blindsided to the fact that he's leaving his legion behind. He's pushing forward. Instead of going together as a group and fighting against the enemy, he pushes forward. He's now trapped in a situation and he cannot be helped by his legion. The weakness, the desperation is that weakness, where he lets go of the auxiliary forces, the human forces, because he claims them to be weak. He proclaims them to be weak, and he also let go of his legion and pushes on forward because he wants to be the strong one. He wants to be the one finishing this job of proving to his brothers, proving to other legions how strong the 10th Legion is with their Primarch. Instead of all of them uniting and going as a group, as a cohesive group, you know, the auxiliary forces, the Astartes and the Primarch, all of them, if they all went together, I think it would have been a far better situation. But now, look, the man is trapped, alone, without his Astartes beside him, without the auxiliary forces beside him as well.
To approach it, all bionics and electronics malfunctioned and died. For a very legion, almost half machine, half man, their greatest strength had become their greatest weakness.
And the auxiliary forces are all killed in battle. They're dead. They can't be there to assist those Astartes who have been disabled by some sort of electrical field that is, you know, disabling their bionic enhancements. Now, many of them are going to die on this battlefield, where this could have been avoided if he had worked together with all of his forces as a united, cohesive force.
Ferrus was on his own, as his sons held bated breath and anguish at their weakness for not being able to aid their lord. Ferrus looked around himself, his dull silver eyes gazing upon a gloomy cavern system. He pushed forward and then began to feel an intrusion into his mind. Visions, images of screaming dead, the sensation of a blade slicing his head from his shoulders, a memory of Vulcan gifting him a sword, himself letting his pride get in the way of accepting it graciously. Barbs and insults echoed around him until one cut deeply. Unwanted son. This last barb stuck in his throat. Ferrus was remarkable upon Medusa. He was a king of kings. None could match him. But when his father came and brought him 17 remarkable brothers, he realized his place. Unlike Vulcan, who had accepted his position gladly and humbly, Ferrus railed. Was he not the equal of his siblings? When faced with the glory of Horus, the majesty of Sanguinius, or even Rogel Dawn's solidity, it was easy to believe that some sons would wait in the wings, or the chosen few enacted their father's grand plan for the galaxy.
I wish you were more like Jagatai Khan. He doesn't give a damn about what this hierarchy of brothers. He doesn't give a damn. He's doing his own thing, further away from the heart of the galaxy, if I can say that. You know, him and his legion are just doing their own thing. He doesn't care about this perceived rivalry between the brothers. He is not bobbed down with this mentality of saying he has to be the best, he has to be perfect, he has to be strong. His legion also has to be the best. They have to be strong, no matter what. Your obsession is your weakness, and it continues to grow. Ferrus, I wish you were more like Jagatai Khan. I wish you guys could all learn from Jagatai Khan. Anyways.
His greatest fear of all was to be the runt of the litter, the weakest, the one left behind. From the shadows it came out, the cold reptilian eyes, the vision, a serpentine beast that moved at a speed that was beyond even his, stalking, attacking him as he moved further into the cavern, eventually reaching a bizarre, decrepit throne room, complete with a rotting corpse upon a throne. How much was real, he could not tell. A half-serpent, man-beast finally revealed itself, and so the Gorgon of Medusa threw himself at it, obliterating the creature. He was victorious, but with his wounds pouring, his head pounding with rage, he threw open the doors behind the carrion throne, ready to confront the masters of his suffering and manipulation.
Hold on. Gardinaal Prime. Okay.
You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength. A gem cannot be polished without friction, nor a man perfected without trials.
Ferrus strode out from the storm, alien blood slick on his torn battle plate. His sons were overjoyed. Their Primarch lived. Gabriel Santar asked his lord what had happened to him, but Ferrus told him it did not matter. For how could he tell his sons of what visions he had seen? The serpent man-beast, of how the conniving Eldari had tried to tempt him by speaking of prophecy, of how they had drawn him here to warn him of a great doom, an angel exterminatus, of his future death. But Ferrus had defied the Xenos, roaring back, "I know I will die, just as I know my place and duty. It matters not if it is upon some blackened world I've never seen, or the very crags of Medusa itself. I am a warrior king, alien, but I am also something else, human. And unlike you, Eldar, we humans do not submit to fate. We shape it."
You hear that, Conrad Kurz? You hear that? You hear that?
But Ferrus dared not tell anyone of what he saw or heard. The very idea that the Eldari had seen the possibility of manipulating him, that they perceived some weakness within him, burned in his thoughts. Ferrus and the Iron Hands finally left 1544. Compliance had finally been achieved, and the Great Crusade required their attention. The aftermath a sobering experience for the Legion. For their greatest strength, their iron had become a weakness, and the warnings of Xenos left unheeded. The decades began to pass for Ferrus and the 10th Legion, spreading out to the stars in conquest as more and more colonies and worlds were brought into Imperial compliance. Eventually Ferrus and his sons answered the call for aid from an Ultramarine and Emperor's Children contingent against the non-compliant pocket empire of Gardinaal. 11 worlds under the iron grip of the totalitarian regime, the so-called Lords of Gardinaal. It was an empire of genetic manipulation, all humans genetically bred for their specific roles, each crafted towards traits that would allow them to excel at their permanent role in life. They were designed to be perfect. There were billions upon billions of them.
Billions upon billions. Gardinaal. An empire of 11 worlds. But we are told that humanity is facing extinction. That humanity is going to die out without the Emperor and his guidance. This is another empire that has been robbed of us. Another path that humanity could have been led to, instead of being dragged into this Imperium of Man by the Emperor and his Astartes and Primarchs. The Emperor robbed us of potential futures. He gave us his future, his only desired future. This tyrant. He robbed us of a potential human empire that could have led humanity to a different path. But now we are stuck here with this Imperium of Man, where we are in a stagnated 41st millennium. No clear hope of what is going to transpire for us in the future, because of the ambition and the selfishness and the greed of one man, or this thing that calls itself a man, the Emperor of Mankind. We were robbed. What could have been if this empire continued to grow? Wow.
Tide of engineered humans whose compliance was now Ferrus's responsibility. perfection. It was demanded of him, and so the work of compliance began. The Iron Hands descended down to the surface of Gardinaal Prime, the Imperium's genetically advanced super soldiers against the hordes of vat-grown people of Gardinaal. It was a slaughter. For every Iron Hand, Ultramarine and Emperor's children, there were 500 Gardinaal soldiers, but they kept coming. The enemy was literally throwing themselves upon the 10th Legion until their ammunition ran out and their weapons clogged with meat. But the Lord Primarch had not taken to the field. There had been rumours circulating the many fleets of the Great Crusade that his father, the Emperor, would be leaving the front line and handing the responsibility to another. Ferrus knew the rumour and the possibility of one of his brothers being chosen to take up that responsibility. Again, his mind turned to his brothers. Fulgrim, his closest friend, an orator, a symbol that inspired, or Guilliman, an administrator beyond his abilities, and then Horus. They were all the same age, yet to be in the presence of the Lupercal, that charisma, it was as if he had been cast in the very light of their father. Ferrus knew war, the path towards perfection, and the expunging of weakness. His conquest record was exemplary, but he knew his name was not spoken in the same reverence as Horus, Dawn, the Lion, or Guilliman. The prosecution of war against Gardinaal had to be different. He had held back from his usual tendencies. He was capable of being level-headed and diplomatic, like his brothers. He would prove it. The battle upon Gardinaal Prime was a slow, grinding affair, testing the patience of Ferrus as he remained upon his Medusan carved throne, in orbit. He wanted desperately to turn to his old ways, a battle within himself, trying desperately to keep it in check. Finally, the Gardinaal requested to negotiate once again, and made their way towards the Primarch and his flagship. Miles of cold, ceramite corridors the diplomats strode, finding themselves dwarfed by a vault door, with all the brutality and cold efficiency of Medusan design. Inside a warrior king's chambers, the representative lords of Gardinaal looked upon a being whose genetic design was far superior to theirs. Ferrus equally assessed them, looking upon one housed inside his own powered armor. He took it apart in his mind. The shielded coils, the energy-reflective materials. He assessed the power of its cores and the hidden energy weapons his sons had missed. He felt a sting of annoyance at his son's ignorance and weakness in...
It's not about weakness, Ferrus. You have far superior genetically manipulated bodily organs, like your eyes. You know, your sons don't have the same sort of powers you have as a Primarch, so they would have never been able to detect that there are weapons hidden under the armor of this Gardinaal person. So it's not weakness.
Missing these facts, but his face remained stern and iron. Leaning forward in his throne, he asked the lords of Gardinaal if they had come to surrender. They had not, they replied. They had come to kill him. The chamber door mechanism locked as one of the Gardinaal sacrificed themselves in an explosion. Ferrus was locked within, alone. Ferrus felt a presence touch his mind as one of the two representatives locked his gaze upon him. The Gorgon of Medusa leapt from his throne, charging his would-be assassins. Forgebreaker tightened his metallic grip. The great hammer met sword and energy field as he began to duel the equally enormous Gardinaal Prime powered suit. And then the room shifted around him. He looked around to see lava flows and Medusan rock. A howl echoed in the air, one he knew all too well. The haunting scream of Azeroth, the silver worm. More visions came, his brother Rogel Dawn standing over him, with his fists soaked in blood and a face of pure anger. Oh, he remembered that day, when he had pushed him that far, and he had reveled in that sensation. More visions came, of the time he scaled Karashi, of the great battles he had fought. This was not real. The other Lord of Gardinaal, he was a psyker, trying to put him off balance as he dueled the mechanized warrior in front of him. The battle was brutal. Hammer blows that could level mountains pummeled against energy fields. Vibro blades and plasma shots glanced against his Medusan forged plate. His own men outside were attempting to crack the very vault doors built by a Primarch. No help was coming. Again, the Psyker attempted to distract him, showing him visions of his defeat at the Emperor's hand. They laughed, declaring that they had already calculated his death, that they knew him. You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength. They knew him, he thought. Even my own father doesn't know me. Even from his earliest days, his greatest weapon had been his mind, his will to grow, to become stronger. He had power over his mind, and that very strength drowned Aseroth. It led him to conquer a world, and even challenge the strongest being in the galaxy. They knew him? No. Only he knew himself, and what he was capable of. The Psyker had tried to throw his past defeats at him, believing it would dishearten him, but they did not know him. Not Ferrus, because to him, they were not defeats. They were fuel on the path towards perfection. They were gifts. Ferrus exerted his will, the power of his mind, and forced himself into the present. With hot rage burning in his veins, he lunged at the mechanized warrior and tore him apart with his metal hands. Oh, his brothers had known rage, but Ferrus's was apocalyptic, and now victory was his. With his head thrumming with heat from the rage, Ferrus walked up towards the Psyker. Words began to spill forth from the mortal human, but he didn't get a chance to finish, as Ferrus rocketed Forgebreaker into the assassin who dared try to kill the Gorgon of Medusa. Ferrus emerged from his throne chamber, but the mood amongst the fleet was solemn. The assassination attempt should never have happened, or have nearly been so successful. The efforts of Ferrus's diplomacy had backfired, and now he had made an error. He had looked weak. It was a sensation that had to be quashed if the compliance of Gardinaal was to succeed. Order and discipline needed to be revived, and so Ferrus chose a conduit, an example for the Legion to bear witness to.
I've never been able to find a challenge amongst my own sons.
Ferrus remained as still as a mountain as the 3rd Legion serfs clattered into the cage, pushing an arming dummy encased in Arkuduana's magnificent battle plate. Piece by piece they began unbuckling his training leathers and drilling him into his war harnesses, ignored by the Primarch as he spoke.
Even the Legion's ancients can only match me so far. I built this cage myself, for my brothers.
Arkuduana held out his arms, while his serfs machined on plate and engaged the seals.
Then these bars could tell some stories.
Fewer than you might think. My brothers are surprisingly reluctant.
Arkuduana's eyebrow arched. The armorers moved to his legs.
Oh?
Fulgrim would joke that he would die with shame, were his sons to see him defeated. Vulcan said that he did not want to hurt me. Me? I told him that I would make a finer weapon than that I gifted Fulgrim, and if he would try. And these bars have few stories to tell.
But not none.
Ferrus's eyes glinted like daggers. His smile did not blunt their edge.
I am honored, Lord.
The armorers pulled and prodded at Arkuduana's seals. The ranking serf work approached with his helmet. Arkuduana waved him away. He was about to fight a Primarch, and he intended to savor it.
I do you no harm.
So this is how he's going to set an example fighting against an Astartes from the 3rd Legion. You are a Primarch, Ferrus. You are a Primarch. I don't know why you're doing this with an Astartes. I would understand maybe a Primarch, someone of your level, because this is not going to... I don't know what type of example you're trying to set, but okay, alright.
I know.
Your birth father fought the Emperor.
He did.
My brother speaks highly of you.
I know.
He says you have no equal.
Gardinaal shrugged, but felt a tingle of pride. Not so much in the fact as that it had been spoken by a Primarch.
The Emperor's children boast many fine swordsmen. Ravash Cario has the potential to be great, and there is a brilliant young legionary in the Second Company called Lucius, who may yet reach my standard.
Lucius? Oh gosh.
If he can tear his face from the mirror.
But they are not you.
They are not me.
I know how that feels.
Gardinaal pivoted around the waist, made some practice punches, testing the armorer's work. The power servos whined as he drew Timur and Athea. The serfs had rebelted his scabbards over his power armor, and the two Chanabral sabers emerged from their silks with the most expectant of sighs. An unmodified mortal at the farthest part of the hall would have felt it. Ferrus's eyes flickered with self-hatred. Ferrus Manus attacked before the command to begin had left his mouth. Given his Goliath physique, his speed was staggering. A lesser duelist than Gardinaal would have been pulverized on the spot, and even he was forced into an admiring grasp as the smoldering metal fist thundered past his eyes. The Primarch was holding nothing back, and with a roar he came again. A thrilling combination of terror and exhalation filled Gardinaal as he ducked between blows. Under them, away, fed by a lightness of heart he had not felt with a sword in his hand since the first time he had stood before Old Corinth, before the unification had been won. Ferrus bellowed and swung with his left. Gardinaal bent under it and allowed it to clang into the bars. He rolled back, always back. He did not bother using his swords to parry. It would have been like blocking a bane blade. He ducked and weaved, danced and slid, swords a blur of feint and misdirection. His movements were intuitive, faster than gene-enhanced thought, but compared to the gap between the audacious youngster and the grizzled Thunder Warrior, that between Legionary and Primarch was a yawning one. He grinned. He was going to have to try. With sheer, bludgeoning power, Ferrus forced him up against the bars. His swords bit at the vulnerable points in the Primarch's armor. Ferrus ignored them. Stings from a persistent insect. He feinted with Timur, drawing the Primarch's eyes, and then used the lengths of Athenia to stab at the Primarch's groin. The master-crafted saber pierced the heavy mail, only to become wedged between a pair of crushed rings. Ferrus gave a snarl and smacked the blade with his wrist. The ancient Grecan blade shattered, rune-inscribed metal shards daggering the floor at Gardinaal's feet. The force of the blow splintered his gauntlets, sent hairline fractures running up Gardinaal's vambrace, and almost pulled his shoulder from its socket.
Seriously, what was the point of all of this? What are you trying to prove to your legion by fighting against one of the greatest swordsmen in the 3rd Legion?
He cried out in glee.
Why do you laugh?
Ferrus drew back. Even unarmed, he had reach. Gardinaal could only shrug, enfolding Timur in a two-handed grip.
Because...
Spitting with anger, Ferrus drove his fist at Gardinaal's chest. Too big to avoid. Too fast. He cried out in shock as his breastplate caved in, splitting the Palatine Aquila into frayed halves. Gold leaf fluttering around the hot liloquence of Ferrus's arm. Knuckles ground in. His ribplate cracked, then shattered. Before he had even registered the pain, he was flying, crashing into the bars with force enough to break more bones. The bars themselves were made of firmer stuff, built by Ferrus's own hands to contain the might of a Primarch. They did not bend. Vibrating with a metallic basso profundo, they flung him back into the ring, sprawled on his chest and crying out for the pain of his fractured ribs. A great weight pushed into his shoulder, eliciting a murmur of pain, then closed over it, to haul him up by the golden fretwork. Ferrus's eyes burned into his, consumed them in his expression incandescent as he drew back his arm to deliver a finishing blow.
I, too, once fought the Emperor. He is a greater being than you could imagine. How did your mortal father manage it?
Gardinaal could barely see the fist before him. His eye had swollen, his face puffed and bloodied.
He wished to give him every opportunity to yield.
He gave a laugh, coughing it up in gurgles. Ferrus frowned.
Tell me why you laugh.
Do you not see?
His grip tightened, a splintering of ceramite. Gardinaal chuckled, winced, and then chuckled again.
This is what we were born to do. Both of us. To fight, and eventually, one day, to lose. It feels good.
Some of the aggression left Ferrus's eyes.
In one thing at least I was right. Our legions have much to learn from one another.
He lowered Gardinaal to the ground, where the captain proceeded to fold bonelessly over his knees.
What is now past was your war. What now commences shall be mine. There will be no feast of celebration, no proclamation of victory. I do not claim worlds. I conquer them. My victories are their own proclamation. I will present my brother Guilliman with ash around a barren star. That shall be my proclamation, and the Gardinaal shall forevermore be remembered only for the manner in which they fell.
His gaze passed over his warriors, silent before his scorn. For what they had just witnessed was not a contest, it was a lesson.
I've sought to lead as Fulgrim or Guilliman would have led, but that is not my way, and is not the Medusan way. The Gardinaal have had ample opportunity to yield.
Grumbles of agreement swept the hall. Gardinaal swayed on the spot, blinking up at the Primarch, and it fell to Sirius to speak out.
The Emperor desired these worlds intact.
The Gardinaal rule over 11 worlds. I will give my father 10.
The 413th expedition will not act in defiance of the Emperor.
You are derelict, Chapter Master.
Sirius straightened against his wedge spear.
I serve the Emperor of Terra, the ideals of his Great Crusade, my father and his brothers. In that sequence,
I wish all the legions could follow in that sequence, where it's the Emperor first, and then it's your father, your Primarch. I wish all of them could act that way, but it's not possible.
will not defy the first of my masters by ordering the destruction of Gardinaal Prime.
For a long time, Ferrus glared down at the Ultramarine, and then a smile found its way across his face.
Perhaps if you were the 413th, where you belonged, then you would have known. You are no longer in command of the expedition fleet.
You do not have that authority.
He's a Primarch, of course he does.
Guilliman can restore your command once he arrives. I'll be done with you by then. Until that happens, your orders come from Iron Father Moore. He knows what I expect of my warriors.
That's the problem with the path of improvement. The delusion of superiority, of purity. You lose the ability to listen. From such black and white views of right and wrong, you become unreceptive to the wisdom of others.
They both knew what this was. They could see it in each other's eyes. an unspoken truth that did not need to be verbalized. Inside a fighting cage designed to hold Primarchs, Ferrus glared down upon Arkaduana, champion of Fulgrim's Emperor's Children Legion. Ferrus had challenged the legendary champion of the Third. It was a display, an unfair fight, but one to unleash the Legion's shame and unite them. Arkaduana was the best, a symbol to the Third, whose very own father had the honor of dueling the Emperor in the early years of the Great Crusade. Arkaduana was the best. He knew. There was no arrogance in that statement. Being the deadliest in the room was a sensation that Ferrus knew all too well. The duel began. Ferrus let flow the feelings of self-hate and shame. He roared with rage at his error, his weakness, and lunged bare-fisted at Arkaduana. It was like a man fighting a wild beast, as Arkaduana tried desperately to dodge the furious attacks of the metal-armed creature. The champion of the Third lasted longer than any legionary before, but he still faced a Primarch. The champion's body was crushed, his ribs shattered as a living weapon nearly beat him to death. But where Ferrus's features were of snarling hate, Arkaduana was smiling. He was laughing. "Tell me, why do you laugh?" Ferrus spat in his victim's face. "Don't you see? This is what we were born to do. Both of us. To fight, and eventually one day, lose. It feels good." The words cut deep. The anger melted in an instant. It seemed another understood the gift of being beaten. It seemed another understood the gift of defeat. He was a Primarch. Triumphs and glory were common, but defeats, challenges that pushed him to the edge of his abilities, they were precious. That day the Emperor of mankind, that golden beacon, that perfect warrior, handed him such an utter defeat. He saw the new possible heights. He saw the lesson and potential. He saw what true strength was. He saw his own weaknesses and how to eliminate them. That's the problem with the path of improvement. The delusion of superiority, of purity. You lose the ability to listen. From such black and white views of right and wrong, you become unreceptive to the wisdom of others. The Emperor had humbled him, shattered his self-delusion as the strongest being, and had shown him that he was not at the end of his journey towards perfection. He had only just begun it. Perhaps there was things that Fulgrim, Guilliman, or Horus could teach him, but he was not them. He finally saw it now, the path, not to be the best Primarch, the one lauded like his brothers. What he needed to be was the best Ferrus Manus. He gently placed the wounded Arkaduana to the ground and looked to his sons, declaring, "The Gardinaal rule over 11 worlds. I will give my father 10. He was the Gorgon of Medusa. He was no orator or diplomat. He was a conqueror." Gardinaal Prime fell under the full weight of Ferrus and the Iron Hands Legion. No longer holding back, destruction and devastation ground the Gardinaal into submission and compliance. For nearly 2 centuries, Ferrus had been at war in the stars. Long had been since his early life on Medusa. But once again the balance of the galaxy shifted. The rumors were true. And at the dawning of the 32nd millennium, upon the world of Ulanor, the Emperor of mankind, his father declared his stepping down from the Great Crusade. He would return to Terra to consolidate what the Imperium had gained. It broke the heart of all of the Primarchs. Ferrus anguished at the thought of not seeing his father for a long time. But the Great Crusade would not be leaderless. One brother would be elevated above the rest. War Master Horus. Ferrus could not begrudge his brother, for he had earned it. He knew he was a symbol the Imperium needed. With the Emperor returning to Terra, a new era of the Great Crusade had begun. Again, the 52nd Fleet, Ferrus Manus and the Iron Hand set out to the stars, bringing thousands upon thousands of worlds into Imperial compliance. It was in the years following the coronation of War Master Horus that Ferrus and the Iron Hands found themselves on the tail of a new foe. Orbiting the sun of a desolate system was a nomadic fleet, containing colony ships from Terra's earliest expansions, millennia before. But to the Imperium's scouts' disgust, they found a confederation of humans and Xenos, living together side by side, the Diasporax, a society not permitted in the bounds of the Imperium. The humans
Diasporax.
were offered a place inside the Empire, but they refused, leaving only war. For months, Ferrus and his legion chased the shadows of this fleet, finding themselves outmaneuvered by the faster, sleek vessels. Ambush after ambush had begun to take a toll, enraging Ferrus at the failure of his captains. His temper only once again soothed by the words of Gabriel Santa, but the situation had become clear. The Diasporax required the Iron Hands to be the hammer, but they needed their anvil. Ferrus declared to his sons that their brother Legion, the Emperor's children, had been summoned, and would join them soon in purging these Xenos. The roars almost deafened the chamber, as the two closest brothers and legions would once more join in battle.
The 3rd and the 10th.
Aboard his brother's ship, Ferrus strode onto the embarkation deck. The warriors of the 3rd looked upon the enormous Primarch, his face like granite, and his features stern and brutal. His nickname, the Gorgon, earned. Ferrus looked up towards his brother Fulgrim, and a smile, so warm and honest, beamed from him. They embraced like family. For what felt like the first time in decades, Ferrus relaxed, truly comfortable. The warmness of his smile, and his tone, a shock to his accompanying Iron Hands.
He truly loved his brother. Which makes this so sad. You know, what happens in the future. It just makes it so disturbingly sad.
Battle plans were made immediately, before the two Primarchs retired to Fulgrim's private quarters. It had become more of a gallery than a warship, the Gorgon remarked. Art was a distraction to him, but yet he respected it as part of his brother's path towards perfection. The galaxy had changed since they had last seen each other. The era of War Master Horus had kept them apart for too long. Each of them reveled in the time they had together, but they had changed too. The title of prominence among his brothers to Ferrus had seemed less enticing. He saw the weight of responsibility on Horus's shoulders, realizing that being the best Ferrus Manus, the path of perfection diverged from the path of War Master. But the change in his brother did not slip Ferrus. He knew his brother better than anyone. His usual bravado and confidence, a facade he knew to be a performance to inspire others, seemed like it was becoming the real thing. It unnerved him, but yet his love for Fulgrim was blinding.
So, this is when the corruption was slowly taking over. Okay.
The hunt for the Diasporax had begun. Ferrus let loose the moorings of his fleet and roared towards the hybrid human and Xenos fleet. They had always been on the back foot, but now they had them pinned. The battle was fierce, but anchored in one place. The larger colony ships of the Diasporax were overwhelmed, the lighter cruisers unable to retreat and engage on their own terms, with the corridors slick with human and alien blood. The 3rd and 10th Legion had purged this filth, the humans choosing to fight rather than giving up their Xenos allies. The battle had been won, but something had felt wrong to Ferrus. He had placed his flagship in front of his brothers, in the midst of battle, shielding him from a barrage. But this gesture was not reciprocated. Arriving aboard Fulgrim's flagship, Ferrus and Gabriel Santar and his Morlocks arrived to what felt like a gauntlet of Fulgrim's warriors. The ceremony of fraternity had been conducted in haste, uncomfortably formal for what should have been the closest brothers and legions. Ferrus understood that the legions had not left as friends. Shielding his brother's ship, the idea of being saved. For a man on the road towards perfection, he knew this may have wounded the pride of Fulgrim. He had known him for centuries, but still this reaction surprised him. It would be only a few short years after the destruction of the Diasporax that Fulgrim sent word that he was making an unscheduled visit to his beloved brother. That warm, honest smile creeped across Ferrus's face as he welcomed again Fulgrim into his private forge, eager to hear the words that his brother had promised could only be spoken in person.
I wonder who else amongst the Primarchs had such a close relationship like Fulgrim and Ferrus. Really? Wow.
I made that for Vulcan more than 150 years ago,
said Ferrus.
So, why is it still here?
You know what Vulcan's like. He loves to work in the metal, and he doesn't trust anything that hasn't had the beat of a hammer laid upon it, or the fire of the forge in its heart.
Ferrus held up his shimmering, mercurial hands and said,
I don't think he liked the fact that I could shape metal without heat or hammer. He returned it to me a while later, saying it should remain here with its creator. I think Nocturne's superstitions aren't as forgotten as our brother would have us believe.
Fulgrim reached up to touch the weapon, but curled his fingers into a fist before they touched the warm metal. To touch such a perfect weapon without firing it would be wrong.
I understand that there is a certain attraction in a handsomely made weapon, but to apply such artistry to a thing designed to kill seems extravagant,
said Fulgrim.
Really?
Chuckled Ferrus, hefting Forgebreaker and pointing at a fire blade, sheathed at Fulgrim's hip.
Then what were you doing in the Urals?
Fulgrim drew his sword and turned it in his hands, so that it caught the light and threw dazzling red reflections around the forge.
That was a contest,
smiled Fulgrim.
I didn't know you then. And I wasn't going to have you outdo me, was I?
Ferrus circled the iron forge, pointing his warhammer at the magnificent creations he had wrought, and which hung upon the wall.
There was nothing in weapons, machinery, or engineering devices that obliges them to be ugly. Ugliness is a measure of imperfection. You of all people should appreciate that.
Then you must be perfectly imperfect,
said Fulgrim, his smile robbing the comment of malice.
Fulgrim? No, man. No.
We've been pretty to you and Sanguinius, my brother. I'll stick to fighting. Now come on, what's this all about? You speak of the future of the Great Crusade, and then want to talk of weapons in old times. What's going on?
Fulgrim tensed, suddenly anxious at what he was to ask of his brother. He had hoped to approach the matter surreptitiously, feeling out his brother's position and the likelihood of him joining them willingly.
No. Say what you want to say. Stop wasting time. Stop doing this political meanderings here, trying to feel out his position. No. Say what you want to say. I think that's one thing I like about Furness. He doesn't beat around the bush. He's forward with you. If he doesn't like you, he will say it. If he likes you, he will say it. If he has a problem with you, he will say it. Doesn't beat around the bush. Do the same thing, Fulgrim. Let's see you try to convince your brother to turn to the side of chaos with Horus. Come on.
But with typical Medusan directness, Ferrus Manus had come right out and demanded to know his purpose. How artless and blunt.
When did you last see the Emperor?
Asked Fulgrim.
The Emperor? What does that have to do with anything?
Indulge me. When was it?
A long time ago.
Admitted Ferrus.
Arena Septimus, on the crystal headlands above the acid oceans.
I last saw him on Ulanor, at the War Master's coronation,
said Fulgrim, moving towards the great anvil and trailing his fingers along the cold metal.
I wept when he told us that he believed the time had come for him to leave the crusading work to his sons, and that he was returning to Terra to undertake a still higher calling.
The Great Triumph,
nodded Ferrus sadly.
I was on a campaign in the Kilar Nebula, and too far distant to attend personally. It is the one regret I have, not being able to say my farewells to our father.
I was there,
said Fulgrim, his voice choked with emotion.
I stood on the dais next to Horus and Dorn when the Emperor told us he was leaving. And it was the second most heartbreaking moment of my life.
Second? What's the first? Hey, this guy. He's so dramatic.
We begged him to stay, to see out what he had begun, but he turned his back on us. He would not even say what his great work was. Only that were he not to return to Terra, then all that we had won would crumble and fall into ruins.
Ferrus Manus looked up at him.
I can imagine Fulgrim with a tissue paper going, he left us. He abandoned us. Oh, Fulgrim, oh man, you should have been an actor, man. Oh, you're so good. The voice actor is doing a good job here.
Eyes narrowed.
You talk as if he abandoned us.
That was how it felt,
said Fulgrim, his tone bitter.
How it still feels.
You said yourself that our father was returning to Terra, to preserve all that we had fought and bled for. Do you really think he would not have wanted to see the final victory of the Crusade?
I don't know,
said Fulgrim angrily.
He could have stayed. What difference would a few years make? What could be so important that he had to leave us there and then?
Ferrus took a step towards him, and Fulgrim saw the reflection of his hurt anger in the mirrored eyes of his brother. The betrayal of everything he and the Emperor's children had fought for over the last 200 years.
I do not understand what you imply, Fulgrim,
said Ferrus, his words trailing off as the import of Fulgrim's earlier words came to him.
What did you mean when you said it was the second most heartbreaking moment of your life? What could be greater than that?
Please do tell us, Fulgrim.
Fulgrim took a deep breath, knowing that he would have to come flat out and say what he had come to say.
What could be greater than that? When Horus told me the truth of how the Emperor had betrayed us and planned to cast us aside in his quest for godhood,
said Fulgrim, relishing the horrified expression of surprise and fury on his brother's face.
Fulgrim!
Shouted Ferrus.
What in Terra is wrong with you? Betrayed us? Godhood!
Fulgrim took quick steps to stand before Ferrus Manus, his voice passionate now that he had taken the final step and confessed his true reasons for coming here.
Horus has seen the truth of things, my brother. The Emperor has already abandoned us, and even now plots his apotheosis. He lied to us all, Ferrus. We were nothing more than tools to win back the galaxy in preparation for his ascension.
Well, at least with that, you are actually all telling the truth. 100%, you are a tool. Such a shame that it only took you guys so long to realize that. But anyways.
The perfect being he pretended to be was a filthy lie.
Ferrus pushed him off and backed away, his ruddy, craggy features pale and horrified, knowing he had to press on. Fulgrim said,
Others have already seen the truth of this and are moving to join Horus. We will strike before the Emperor is even aware that his designs have been unmasked. Horus will reclaim the galaxy in the name of those whose blood was spent to conquer it.
Fulgrim wanted to laugh as the words spilled from him, the thrill of finally unburdening himself, almost too great to stand.
Ferrus, you know what we do to traitors, right? You know what happens to traitors. Don't hold back. Actually, call your legion in as well. You know, don't fight him alone. Fight him with your legion as well. The more the merrier, you know. Let him be outnumbered and then, yeah.
Breath heaved in his lungs, and he could not tell whether the thundering he could hear was the blood surging in his skull, or the hammers of faraway forges. Ferrus Manus shook his head, and Fulgrim despaired as he saw his brother's horror turning to fury.
This is the new direction of the crusade you spoke of.
Yes,
cried Fulgrim.
it will be a glorious age of perfection, my brother. What we have won is already being given away to imperfect mortals who will waste the glories we have won for them. What we have earned in blood and tears will be ours again. Can't you see that?
All I see is betrayal, Fulgrim,
roared Ferrus Manus.
You are not talking about claiming back what we have won. You are talking about betraying everything we stand for.
My brother,
implored Fulgrim.
Please, you must listen to me. The Mechanicum has already pledged its support to the War Master, as have many of our brothers. War is coming. War that will engulf this galaxy in flames. When it is over, there will be no mercy for those on the wrong side.
He saw the color flood back into his brother's face, a raw and bellicose red that he knew all too well.
Ferrus, I beg you, for the sake of our brotherhood, to join us.
Brotherhood?
Bellowed Ferrus.
Our brotherhood died when you decided to turn traitor.
Fulgrim backed away from his brother as he saw the murderous intent in his blazing silver eyes.
Angron is ready to strike, and Mortarion will soon be with us. You must join me, or you will be destroyed.
No,
snarled Ferrus Manus, hefting Forgebreaker to his shoulder.
It is you who will be destroyed.
Ferrus, no,
pleaded Fulgrim.
Think about this. Would I come to you like this if I did not believe that it was the right thing to do?
I don't know what's happened to you, Fulgrim, but this is treachery and there is only one fate for traitors.
Death.
So you are going to kill me?
Ferrus hesitated, and Fulgrim saw his shoulders sag in despair.
I am your sworn honor brother, and I swear to you that I do not lie,
pressed Fulgrim, hoping that there was still a chance to convince his brother not to act in haste.
Bravo, bravo! Fulgrim, you are amazing. Oh man, this guy's convincing me. The voice actor of Fulgrim is convincing me now. That, you know, Fulgrim's telling the truth. Fulgrim wants to protect the Imperium of Man. He wants to, you know, guide us to a far better path than the Emperor. Really, he's convincing me. Bravo.
I know you're not lying, Fulgrim. And that's why you have to die!
Oh, here we go. Here we go. Back again.
Fulgrim had betrayed him. He had betrayed the Emperor, and there were others. Angron, Mortarion, and Horus. In his most sacred chambers, overjoyed to see his closest friend in the universe, his joy turns to ash as Fulgrim began to speak, unfolding a tale for a new direction of the Great Crusade. Horus has seen the truth of things, my brother. The Emperor has already abandoned us, and even now plots his apotheosis. He lied to us all, Ferrus. We were nothing more than tools to win back the galaxy in preparation for his ascension. Ferrus couldn't believe what he was hearing. Like each word was slowly killing the friendship he and Fulgrim had for centuries. Hearing how he spoke of their father, the pinnacle of perfection, the star that Ferrus's worldview orientated around, this new direction of the Great Crusade disgusted him. His heart began to quicken. He felt his pulse pound in his head as his rage began to rise. You are not talking about claiming back what we have won. You are talking about betraying everything we stand for. Our brotherhood died when you decided to turn traitor. Fulgrim pleaded with him, telling him you must join me or you will be destroyed. Ferrus did not understand what had overcome Fulgrim, but he had betrayed him and the Imperium, and the only fate for traitors is death. Ferrus's body tensed as he prepared to launch himself at Fulgrim. So, are you going to kill me? The statement cut deep. Even now, Ferrus loved his brother, a bond like no other, but that was why it was so painful. To have his complete and utter trust in a person shattered. He would never trust again, never allow himself to feel this pain again. Forgebreaker slammed into Fireblade as the two Primarchs tried to kill each other. Tears stung Ferrus's eyes for the first time in his existence. But the look upon Fulgrim's face was a visage of twisted delight. It disgusted him.
Yeah, definitely corruption.
With blows that were too fast for the human eye, two demigods battled. Ferrus's blows rippled vibrations through Fulgrim's bones, but his blade work was faster, and he made a cut for his brother's head. Fireblade once again returned to the hands that forged it, as Ferrus caught it with his bare metal hands. With his arms glowing from heat, Ferrus broke the weapon that he had forged, the explosion throwing both Primarchs off their feet. Fulgrim, burned and his armor damaged, rose first. He stood over Ferrus as both of their senses began to return. With tears still stinging his dull silver eyes, Ferrus looked to the now stranger above him, declaring that Fulgrim had best kill him, for he will kill him if he does not. Fulgrim once again pleaded with Ferrus, but his words fell on deaf ears. The Gorgon of Medusa would never betray the Emperor, never forsake the oaths he had given. Fulgrim whispered to himself that I will always be your brother, and then he struck Ferrus in the jaw with Forgebreaker, leaving him unconscious. Ferrus awoke hours later, finding his honor guard outside slain, and the Iron Hand's fleet heavily damaged. Once again the galaxy had changed. Civil war had erupted. 4 legions under the banner of Horus had risen up in rebellion. Many worlds declared for the War Master. Xenos attacks escalated, and warp storms began to ravage the galaxy. It was all chaotic, everything in flux. In his innermost sanctums, Ferrus spent weeks on the Forge, his place of comfort. They say the emotions of all craftsmen find its way into their pieces, and so Ferrus began to reforge Fireblade, the one he had created in the Urals 2 centuries before. Once filled with love and admiration, it was now filled with vengeance and hate. His silver hands sculpted and forged as his mind drifted. Fulgrim had betrayed him. Had he let him live because of love or pity? Why did he believe that Ferrus could turn? What did he see within him that was weak?
I don't think he saw something in you that was weak. It's just that deep down, Fulgrim was still there. That Fulgrim that you knew from the past, he was still there. It's just that it's being controlled, or it's being influenced by chaos, and there will be some moments where you see that person that you loved, and they would try their best to make sure that you join into this group so that he doesn't have to kill you. He still loves you. It's still there, but it's mixed up with chaos now. So it's not about you being weak. He just desperately wanted you to join so that he doesn't have to see you as an enemy on the battlefield.
His brothers questioned that too. Would the Imperium look to him and question his loyalty? He had to face him. He needed to purge these weaknesses from himself. The weakness of being perceived as a traitor, of letting friendship cloud him. Once again, defeat had taught him a lesson. Finally, through the warp storms, news came from Terra. 7 legions were directed to crush this rebellion at its heart, upon the world of Istvaan 5. It had come to this. 2 centuries of the Great Crusade, hundreds of thousands of worlds brought into Imperial compliance, billions upon billions under the light of the Emperor, and like all empires, when it reached the sea, it turned upon itself. Ferrus sat across from his brothers, Corvus Corax of the Raven Guard, and Vulcan of the Salamanders. His enthusiasm was infectious. He was hungry for traitor's blood. Ferrus had made up his mind, and once he had, there was no stopping him. Ferrus Manus, followed by the unified clans of the Iron Hands, roared down towards the cold and bitter surface upon Istvaan 5. The loyalists crashed into the fortified positions of the traitors, beginning the bloodiest battle in the Imperium's history. The skies were lit in permanent orange. Smog and ash choked the atmosphere, as hundreds of thousands of superhuman warriors fought like animals, each side screaming cries of hate. The mortal contingents on both sides would become mad, through the sheer cacophony of violence, the sight stomach-turning, ear-ringing, pulse roaring. Ferrus and his elite Morlocks charged the centre, Astartes falling in their dozens to the demigod with silver hands. Thousands were dying every minute, but Ferrus and the Iron Hands pushed forward. The flesh was weak, but the brutal charge of a legion of Ferrus's sons was not. Finally breaking through, Ferrus and his sons caught sight of the 3rd Legion, and what they saw disgusted them. Their armor, their features had been corrupted. Horrifying displays of sickly color, extreme body modification, and flayed skin draped over them. For hours Ferrus and his sons fought. Skulls were crushed in his iron grip. It was like discarding necrotized flesh. They were cutting the weakness out of the Imperium. With a mountain of traitor and loyalist corpses around him, Ferrus looked to the sky. Reinforcements. The Alpha Legion, Night Lords, Iron Warriors and Word Bearers had arrived. The traitor's line began to break. His brothers Corax and Vulcan called to retreat, to hand over the next assault to their brothers. But then he saw him. Fulgrim. He had to face him. No word seemed to reach Ferrus. No reason or logic factored into his mind. Just the
Yet again, his weakness is winning over his mind. His weakness in his pursuit in trying to prove that he's the strongest, that weakness is not within him. And it's the same situation like when he was up against the Eldar on that desert planet, where he is pushing forward, leaving his forces behind, leaving the human auxiliary forces behind, and he's going it alone. And he was trapped. And the same situation is happening right now, where he's leaving his brother Primarchs alone, he's leaving his Astartes, and he's just pushing forward to his target, and that is Fulgrim.
The rage of one who had been betrayed. Surrounded by the last of his remaining Morlocks of Clan Averni, Ferrus charged, leaving behind most of his legion. He scaled the hill before him, and once again his eyes met the brother. he had once called a true friend. The sight of Fulgrim was heartbreaking and unnerving. He wore the smile of a killer. You betrayed the Emperor, and you betrayed me. The last words racked with emotion that he couldn't mask. Pain he hated himself for feeling. The flesh was weak. Again, Fulgrim tried to convince his brother to join them. The Emperor was a spent force, and there was a new order in the galaxy. Ferrus couldn't believe what he was hearing, even now, when Horus was on the verge of defeat. But Fulgrim smiled, and as Ferrus turned around, horror ravaged his face. The second wave, the reinforcements, turned upon the Iron Hands, Raven Guard, and Salamanders. Ferrus's sons began to fall, carved up and butchered as a second treachery took place. For the first time in his life, Ferrus felt true despair as everything he had built died in front of his eyes. Hate, a rage so complete, washed over him. He was the Gorgon of Medusa, the stubborn, brutal warrior king. But now he was a beast. He drew the reforged fire blade, and the two brothers launched themselves at each other. They hacked and stabbed as the Imperium burned around them. Ferrus felt the bone-shattering strikes as he sliced Fulgrim with his blade. They moved at a speed beyond mortal perception until they broke apart. Ferrus's wounds were pouring. Never had he been pushed like this before. But this time there was no thrill, only emotional and physical pain. He began to overwhelm Fulgrim, ready to kill him, until Fulgrim drew his own blade. An alien, silver gleaming, and sickly purple light radiating from the hilt. Diabolical strength caught Ferrus by surprise. He was thrown back, and his chest was gorged open. Ferrus fell to his knees in pain. Clambering for Fireblade, he looked up one last time, seeing hesitation in Fulgrim. His fingers gripped the hilt of his blade, but the silver edge swung down. Fulgrim cleaved Ferrus's head from his shoulders. Blood poured from the remaining stump as the limp body of the Gorgon of Medusa slumped to the floor.
Imagine you were there as an Iron Hand warrior, watching your Primarch just being decapitated, you know. And there's nothing you can do. You're so far away. You can see what's happening there on top of that hill, between these two Primarchs fighting. You can see it, but there's nothing you can do. You're trying to push yourself towards that battle to help your Primarch. You're trying your best to get there, but then there's nothing you can do. You just watch your father's head just rolling on the floor, blood gushing out of the body. It's over. Oh.
These are not my hands. This fact is forgotten by my brothers. Inexplicably, it has always seemed to me. The hands are strong, to be sure, and have created great things for us all. But they are not mine, and that counts for something. They forget that the silver on my arms comes from a beast that I vanquished. It is the mark of a great evil that I ended, and yet it persists within me. I would struggle to remove it now, and I will not remove the silver from my flesh, because I have learned to depend on it. The fault is with my mind. I rely on the augmentation given to me by the metal gauntlets, so much so that the flesh beneath them is now little more than a distant memory. A day will come when I will strip it from me, lest I lose the power to master myself forever. Already my legion's warriors replace their shield hands with metal in my honor, and so they too are learning to doubt the natural strength of their bodies. They must be weaned off this practice before it becomes a mania for them. Hatred of what is natural, of what is human, is the first and greatest of the corruptions. So I record it here. When the time comes, I will strip my hands of their unnatural silver, and will instruct my legion to recant their distrust of the flesh. I will turn them away with the gifts of the machine, and bid them relearn the mysteries of the flesh, bone, and blood. When my father's crusade is over, this shall be my sacred task. When the fighting is done, I shall cure my legion and myself, for fighting is all there is. If we may never pause to reflect on what such devotion to strength is doing to us, then our compulsion will only grow.
I'll do it,
he said, handing the slate back.
It'll be quicker.
The man slowly offered him the bloody saw, but Shadrach had already leaned over the side of the recliner and drawn his gladius. He set the edge of the blade along the clumsy guide cut that the bone saw had scored, paused, and then struck his ruined hand off with a single swift blow. It bounced off the side of the trolley and landed in the pool of blood on the deck. The serf hesitated, as though he felt it would be polite to pick up the severed hand and return it to Shadrach. Then he remembered himself, dropped the saw, and hurried forward to attend with clamps and wadding.
If it's going to hurt anyway,
said Shadrach, as the man worked, binding the stump tightly.
It's better that it doesn't linger too.
Good advice, he thought, applies to so damned much. Gorgonson returned an hour later and inspected the wound.
Do this yourself. It seemed for the best,
Shadrach replied.
You're no surgeon,
said Gorgonson.
Never claimed to be, but your man there was intent on whittling me down until I was nothing but a spinal column and a rictus.
Gorgonson frowned.
We're doing the best we can, given the circumstances. Well, he made more of a mess of me in 10 minutes than the damn Sons of Horus could manage in a week.
Gorgonson glared at him.
Don't even joke. Damn you, Shadrach. Don't even say the words aloud. You don't think I'm angry? I'm beyond rage. I'm in another place entirely. White heat and boiling blood. I'm going to butcher and burn every one of the bastards. Give me my new hand so I can get on with it.
Gorgonson hesitated. They had known each other for 24 decades. Like Shadrach, Goran Gorgonson had been a Stormwalker, a son of terror. They had fought through the Unification Wars side by side. At their ascendancy, Goran had elected to join Locopt, the clan that most remembered and celebrated the Terran aspect of the founding. But he had changed his name to Gorgonson, in honor of the Primarch.
Anger's not going to get us anywhere, Earth Brother,
Shadrach said quietly.
Except deader than we are already. Anger's a blindfold, a fool's motivation. I reserve it only for killing blows. We need cool heads and clear minds. This is survival, repair, rebuilding. Terra only knows we're good at repair. We excel at it. So this should play to our strengths.
Shadrach is right. Shadrach is actually right there. Don't be consumed by the anger of the loss of your Primarch, or consumed by, melancholy of any sort, since the demise of your Primarch. You just have to try and focus on surviving, focus on rebuilding yourselves after Istvaan 5, focus on making sure that what's ever left of the Legion continues to endure, and save the anger for when you face against your enemies, face to face.
Calling a council. Who's they? The Clan Fathers. A clan council? Well, what in Terra's name for? This isn't a matter of bloodline and heritage. The Clan Fathers are proposing to assume command. The Clan Fathers are proposing to assume command. Collective command. I suppose so. In the absence of...
Gorgonson paused. There were words that were going to be hard to say. Names that were going to be hard to utter.
The Clan Fathers take control for now. Isn't there comfort and assurance in that? They are veterans who understand. A clan council is the last thing we need,
said Shadrach.
Command by committee. Pointless. We need positive, singular leadership.
I didn't know you had aspirations of command,
Gorgonson remarked. Shadrach thought about that for a moment. The notion came as a surprise.
I don't. I've never considered it. I just know we need something now. Someone. We're dead without it. Just a shattered rabble.
Gorgonson sighed.
Any apothecary, even the best of us, will tell you that you can graft on a new hand, but you can't graft on a new head.
Yeah, that is true. That is true.
Then we'll have to learn how,
said Shadrach. A servitor besides Gorgonson was holding the augmetic on a tray.
Nothing fancy,
said the apothecary, reaching for a scraper and neurofuser.
I have no juvenate packing left either, so you'll have to let it bond by itself. Don't test it, it'll be weak. For months, probably. Let it bed in and heal.
Shadrach nodded.
Just fix me up. I'm sure I'll have many weeks of calm and leisure to get the healing done.
Gorgonson started working.
Is he dead?
Yes.
You know this.
Amadeus told me. It was confirmed from the surface.
Lord Commander Amadeus is dead too,
murmured the apothecary.
Yes, I saw it. But his word lives. The Gorgon is dead, and our stepfather Amadeus is gone too. So we can lie down and die with them, or we can learn the graft heads.
Okay, I don't know who the Lord Commander Amadeus is, but it sounds like a very important person. I'm thinking about the first captain, Gabriel Centaur. Where is he? Did he also die on during the Istvaan 5 situation, or is he still alive? I mean, wouldn't he become the de facto leader of the Iron Hands? Huh. Maybe he is dead. Wow. The Iron Hands really were decapitated, literally and figuratively, in terms of their military structure. Their, officers, their Primarch, dead. Wow.
What are you playing at?
Org asked. Shadrach could feel the Iron Father's anger radiating out like a force field. They stood on the caustic shoreline of the Sulphur Lake. Acid vapor swirled like battlefield smoke.
What? We bite our lips now? Even now, in this predicament?
Sorgel has no clan father here. You shame us in the company of...
I shame you?
Shadrach shook his head.
Is that really what matters now? The shame of speaking out? Fates above, we are shamed enough. The clan leaders are groping around, trying to recover something we have lost forever. By the time they reach a decision, we will be discovered and slaughtered. Or, if they reach a decision, it will be the wrong one, and we will be slaughtered anyway.
We need unification, Shadrach,
said Org.
For morale alone.
I agree, but under one war leader, with one purpose.
One leader?
Org laughed bitterly.
Who?
You, perhaps.
Org spat and looked away.
I don't know about this guy. He's too much of a traditionalist to become the leader of the Iron Hands. Nah. You can hear it that this guy is in his camp of his clan. And he just doesn't seem like the person that's going to unite all the other Iron Fathers, and just become the leader. It just doesn't seem that way with him. Shadrach, step up. Step up. It's you, man. It's you. You're the one who initiated this idea. You must be the one to implement it and become the leader. Yeah.
No one wants it. None of us. Not a single captain. Not a single Iron Father. That's why the Clan Fathers have taken the lead. They are projecting a sense of security, of unity through our blood heritage. A reassurance in this time of loss through the bonds of fraternity. But it's a group decision, so that no one shoulders a burden alone. No one bloody wants it. That's why no one has stepped forward and called the rally around him.
He looked at Org.
No one wants to be seen as trying to replace the Gorgon. No one wants to replace Amadeus Duquesne. No one wants to be seen as impertinent or disrespectful. I understand it.
He paused.
But we need to raise the storm again. No one wants to command. No one wants to appear so arrogant as to imagine that he can assume the Primarch's role. But it's not a matter of want, or pride, or vainglorious ambition. It's a matter of necessity.
This talk will get you killed, Terranborn,
said Org.
No!
Shadrach snapped, pointing towards the monastery.
That talk will get us killed.
He lowered his hand. The augmetic graft had not fully healed, and still ached abysmally. The violence of the gesture had jarred it.
I have it on good medical authority that you can't graft on a new head,
he said.
This has become a joke, I'm serious. Really, it's become a joke.
Bez Org uttered a dry laugh. He shifted his flesh-spare frame and wiped his mouth with the back of his hand.
You don't need to be a medical authority to know that,
he replied.
I'm not suggesting that anyone pretends to be the Gorgon. I'm not proposing that anyone presumes he can command as well as Ferrus Manus, or attempt to be such a master. I'm simply talking about focus of authority. One mind, one will, one iron drive, strong enough to compel us long enough to...
To what?
Do what needs to be done.
Which is what?
Revenge. I mean, come on, man. Og, think. Do you want him to answer all the questions?
Survive?
No.
Shadrach looked out over the misted lake. He turns to the Iron Father.
You can't graft on a new head, but you can cut off an existing one. We need to focus long enough to get to Horus, to cut off his head. We decapitate the traitors. We do to them what they did to us. We shatter them and scatter them to the winds. We end this treachery.
After a moment, he added,
Then we can die, for all I care.
Yeah, Shadrach, you're the person, man. You're the guy. You're the guy to do this. These other Iron Fathers and whoever else, nah, man, they just don't really have it in them to lead. They don't want to lead. They'd rather stay in their little clans and stick to traditional ways of Medusa. None of them want to lead the Iron Hands. So, let it be you.
We have learned what it means to be shattered, and the path we must follow to achieve our vengeance. We must learn to pace ourselves, tactical restraint. We must learn the tactics and techniques of those thrown in with us, and respect them. We must take our iron and alloy it with the strength of those shattered alongside us.
He was dead. Ferrus Manus, son of the Emperor. The Gorgon of Medusa. His headless corpse was picked apart by the Emperor's children, like wolves to a carcass.
Oh my gosh.
Each clambering for trophies. His head was tossed by Fulgrim at the feet of War Master Horus. Those dull silver eyes had been plucked clean, the sockets raw and bloody. The flesh was grey and dead. His jaw hung open, and bone projected from one side where it had been caved in. The victory cries of the traitors rung out like a carrion call across the Imperium, declaring death to the false Emperor, and to let the galaxy burn. The Iron Hands Legion had been decimated. Ferrus was dead. First Captain Gabriel Santar was dead. Lord Commander Amadeus Duquesne was gone. All semblance of unity fractured, and the desperate remaining few attempted to flee the massacre and fleet blockade. The Iron Hands, Salamanders and Raven Guard had been shattered. 2 Primarchs were missing, but the Lord of the 10th, unmistakably slain. The survivors of the Istvaan 5 massacre were barely in the thousands, all of them wounded and damaged physically. Scattered ships held collections of Iron Hands, Raven Guard and Salamanders, all from different clans and companies, all disorganized. The Iron Hands had lost nearly everything.
I mean, like I said before, imagine you were there as an Iron Hand, seeing your Primarch being decapitated. And now we're hearing that, you know, Fulgrim was carrying the head of your Primarch, and he threw it to the feet of Horus Heresy, while you're seeing your Primarch's body being ripped apart by the Emperor's children, you know, seeing them just rip it apart, taking any piece of flesh or metal or anything, even his Iron Hands, probably they ripped it off the body and wanting to graft it onto their hands. Just seeing them do that to your father like that, oh, I mean, that would make anyone go mad. That would break anyone's psyche, I think, especially if you're in Astartes and that's your gene sire. Seeing that happen to him, oh, terrible.
Worst of all, something had broken within themselves. Ferrus was dead, their Primarch, their father, the star in which their existence orbited around. The Primarch who had united Medusa and had taken them to the stars. They couldn't process it. They couldn't reconcile that their gene sire had been lost, that he had been weak. He had let his anger and need to prove himself override his tactical sense. He had left them behind to chase his vendetta and lost. Ferrus had let his human emotions get the better of him. Their flesh was weak, and they had been weak too. They had failed to push through, failed to save their lord because they were weak. Horus had shattered them because they were weak. They hated them, the traitors who paraded the corpse of their fallen brothers and Primarch across the Imperium. The anger was so complete, it had come back round into calm. And yet they saw that anger still as the same weakness that had got their Primarch killed. The hate was justified, but was simply a symptom of something wrong within themselves.
No. Just because you are feeling these emotions does not make you weak. You must learn how to control them. Don't allow them to control you, like how they controlled Ferrus. You know, don't allow those emotions to control you. You must be the one to control them. You must be the one to manage them and use them effectively when that time comes. It's not weakness. It's not weakness.
Many of the survivors across the burning Imperium began to meet in secret, conclaves in the dark like vermin, hiding from the light. Leadership had been taken by the Iron Fathers, a return to the Medusan way of life before the Primarch. It was the safe choice, one of fairness, but endless debate and subservient to tradition and indecision. No one wanted it. The responsibility, the arrogance to claim that they could unite the Iron Hands that the Gorgon had. Captain Shadrach Medusan, the Terran-born veteran, couldn't stand it. The loss of his legion, his Primarch, and now the indecision of the Iron Fathers. Hoping to retreat into the remnants of their clan structure was useless. Why divide their strength now? A part of them couldn't blame them. They were simply seeking to find a source of purpose, of comfortable strength to fill the void within themselves. But talk like this would destroy them all. From such black and white views of right and wrong, you become unreceptive to the wisdom of others. They needed to raise the storm. Their Raven Guard and Salamander brothers had their own tactics of war, their own strengths. They were iron, but we must take our iron and alloy it with the strength of those shattered alongside us. They needed to become steel, strong but flexible. The Gorgon is dead, and our stepfather Amadeus is gone too, so we can lie down and die with them, or we can learn to graft heads. It was a difficult ask to the stubborn sons of Medusa, fiercely independent, even as a legion of Astartes in the stars. To ask them to declare that the tactics their Primarch had taught them was not good enough was a tough pill to swallow. The Iron Hand survivors scattered, finding that their very own 10th Legion cipher language had been turned against them. They fell into ambushes, another betrayal by the Emperor's children. Their stubbornness again had cost them, until finally many saw the need for a singular focus, one being at the top, Captain Shadrach Medusan. Alloying with the hit and run stealth of the Raven Guard, with the enduring will and close range firepower of the Salamanders, the Shattered Legion survivors began to reform themselves. Not 10th, 18th or 19th Legion, but Astartes. Divided into cells, the Shattered Legions began to harass the traitors' supply lines. Ruthless fleet engagement and boarding actions became second nature to them. In the cold, claustrophobic ceramide corridors of Astartes vessels, Iron Hands clashed against Sons of Horus, Emperor's Children and Alpha Legion, finding an outlet to unleash their hate and fury, finding it difficult to stop once the slaughter had begun.
But what I like, what I'm hearing here in terms of the legions that were affected during the Istvaan 5 massacre, that they are trying to work together. They're trying to make steel, incorporating all the other Astartes, uniting as one cohesive force and dealing with the traitors. I love hearing that, how they've united like that and they're working together as a team. Yes, there are some teething problems because of the different types of ideologies that they support and believe in, but the fact that they are trying to work together, that's a good thing. That's a really, really good thing.
We need to focus long enough to get Horus to cut off his head. We decapitate the traitors. We do to them what they did to us. We shatter them and scatter them to the winds. We end this treachery. Then we can die for all I care. The Horus Heresy began to rage throughout the Imperium. Years of brutal warfare seemed to touch every system, all forced to choose between the Emperor or Horus. But what had become clear to the Shattered Legions was that there was something more to this war. They had seen up close the new disgusting visages of their once brother Legion, the Emperor's Children. But after each engagement, they saw the traitor legions become more and more twisted. The warp storms that ravaged the galaxy were easily traversed by the forces loyal to Horus. Chaos, foul corruption that stemmed from the warp. 4 dark entities that called themselves gods had infected the War Master and his forces. Whispers and rumors of grand sacrifices and barbaric rituals were rife across the Imperium. Millions were dying. All the more reason to despise them, even as the thought of these so-called gods and the truth about the warp conflicted with the Imperial truth. It was simply another situation in which they had to adapt. The Iron Hands were not whole, but many had been renewed by the purpose of methodical vengeance. But not all fell into the weakness of human emotion. During the Great Crusade, slowly the Iron Hands had become their namesake, as augmetics replaced the weak flesh, damaged or scarred in battle. Ferrus did not approve of this, but kept his thoughts to himself, as one who relied on his own silver hands. With the death of the Primarch and the Legion shattered, there were some who could not bear the weakness that was their humanity. Their anger, their hate, their sorrow, their overwhelming sense of shame and failure that haunted them in the moments of silence. It needed to be locked away. They didn't want to be like their Primarch. Some even went as far as to condemn the Gorgon of Medusa, a man who never truly understood the Medusan ways, an outsider. Others sacrificed the last piece of weakness within themselves, the keys of hell. Technology discovered during the Great Crusade that had been considered heretical by Ferrus Manus and the Mechanicum of Mars. The foundation of faith in the Mechanicum had become the form of the 10th Legion, the holy union between man and machine. But for the bitter survivors who only saw the path of the machine and iron as a way to escape the weakness of their humanity, they turned the keys of hell. Castigan Ulok and his brothers became revenants, a consciousness forever locked inside. As the cybernetics took control, they became parodies of men, machines purged of emotion, engines of war, left with only cold logic. Never able to fall down the path of the Primarch who had let his anger be the death of him. The flesh is weak. The sight of these Gola disgusted their surviving brothers, but open war amongst themselves couldn't be risked when there were so few of them left. The shattered legions were the broken remnants that numbered in the few thousand. Their deaths would only be spent on one objective: Horus Lupercal.
I am not used to repeating myself, Primaris Tech Officer Vackle. This frigate is now under the auspices of the Iron Hands. It is currently interfering with my mission and will move aside. I demand to see the Lord Praetor.
A rumble of hidden gears caused Kratos to turn in the same direction, in time to see the huge portal rumbling open and a blaze of light from the adjoining flight deck flooding between the receding doors. 20 figures were silhouetted against the dark, far bulkier than any normal space marine. As his eyes adjusted, Kratos recognized the Terminator armor, but unlike anything he had seen in a long time. The warplate of the Terminators was far broader and taller than standard legionary power armor, and these had an exoskeletal frame carrying slanted plates of extra armor, all decorated in the dark green livery of the Salamanders. Their hands were fashioned in a variety of powered fists, claws, and chain blades designed for close combat, anti-armor assault, and bulkhead cutting. And in the right they carried an assortment of weapons ranging from simple combi bolters to triple-barreled autocannons, plasma charges, and rocket launchers, and one carried an immensely rare, long-muzzled Volkite culverin. Yet it was not these amendments that amazed Kratos. The Iron Hands had numerous experimental suits of Terminator armor, with modified heavy weaponry, and ablative shields. What stole the curse from Kratos' lips was the additional weapon systems mounted across the backpacks and shoulders of the Terminators. A plethora.
Are you sure that these are not like smaller scaled dreadnoughts? Really, the variety of armaments on these Terminator suits, it's crazy.
Of armor-piercing missiles, las cannons, multi-melters and conversion beamers were all pointing in his direction. Each was quite literally a walking tank. The voice of REE emanated from the external vocalizer of the lead warrior.
Spearhead Centurion Kratos, welcome aboard the Hearthfire. These suits were designed by Vulcan himself, and we were about to transit them to the surface of Istvaan when the massacre began. The Primarch gave me a direct order not to allow them to fall into the hands of the traitors, hence our swift departure.
REE swung first to the left and then to the right, looking at the row of warriors behind him.
You mentioned something about trying to take my ship from me.
If the situation had...
No. Kratos was just exaggerating. He's not here to take your ship. Don't worry. He just wants to talk.
Had not been so fraught, RE might have enjoyed the moment of hesitation before Kratos reluctantly raised his hand in salute and bowed his head to the approaching Pyre Warden. The Salamander's commander had not intended to humiliate his counterpart in this fashion. It had been happenstance that Kratos had launched his ridiculous coup, as RE and the others were about to board their gunships in the neighboring launch bay.
I expect you to return to the Forsyths immediately.
RE raised his powered fist and pointed to the storm strike.
And take your legionaries with you.
What a waste,
replied the Centurion. He waved a hand at the Terminators, shaking his head slowly.
Vulcan entrusted you with his work, and this is how you use it? Even with these armored suits, you cannot take the World Eater's fortress alone. Be thankful that there will be nothing for the enemy once I have annihilated the city after your deaths.
Wait, aren't you guys supposed to be working together? Work together. Fight against the enemy together.
It is not the armor or weapon that makes the warrior. It is the spirit. You will fail. Your sentimentality will be your undoing. The flesh is weak.
I have heard you say that phrase on several occasions since our first encounter. I am not sure that you really understand what it means.
You may have spoken with the Gorgon, but do not think to school me in the teachings of my own Primarch.
What you say, the flesh is weak, is only part of the saying. In forgetting the end, you have lost the meaning. Vulcan said it in praise of Ferrus Manus after the 184th expedition when our legions jointly liberated the orc-dominated worlds of the Shokshua cluster. The fighting had been fiercer than anything we had expected. Your Primarch said in jest that his arm was tired from killing so many orcs, and Vulcan retorted with, "The flesh is weak, but deeds endure." It was a celebration of what they had achieved, and a remark that even Primarchs can die, but what they do will last beyond their lifespan. It was a message of humility, not condemnation. Flesh is weak because it knows it must come to an end, and so we must rise above the concerns of flesh and leave a legacy that others will be proud to inherit. Ferrus Manus understood that. He was a harsh master, an unforgiving ally, but he was also a maker of things. A builder, not a destroyer.
Kratos stepped back, shocked by RE's words. In a moment he had recovered, his confusion quickly turning to irritation.
Another lecture. It doesn't matter what you say. The only thing you're going to leave behind on Prastes are corpses.
Kratos spun away, shouting for his men to embark onto the gunship. He followed them up the ramp and paused. At the top he looked back, with the last shake of the head. RE returned to his warriors and ordered the launch bay sealed again as they lined up to board the dropships.
Oh, Kratos. Please listen. Please listen to RE. Please.
RE looked up and saw dark blurs descending towards the ground.
Torpedoes,
he muttered, not quite believing Kratos had finally acted. Even the Terminator suits would be no defense against the ordnance designed to breach the hulls of battleships. If it spelled the end for the Salamanders, it also heralded destruction for the World Eaters. RE contented himself with the thought that had he not taken out the shield generator, the forces would be using mass drivers and anti-ship missiles rather than pinpoint laser strikes. There would be deaths in the city, but far fewer because of the Salamander's actions. The quiet, confident voice of Veshtar broke through the fog of confusion and disappointment that clouded RE's thoughts as he watched the dark smudges glowing larger above the citadel.
Those aren't torpedoes.
Pinpricks of fire became recognizable, flares of retro rockets firing, the torpedoes resolved into drop pods, several dozen of them, as they slammed into the rockcrete of the killing ground. Some petaled open, discharging flurries of explosive warheads that slashed bloody holes through the World Eaters, slave soldiers. Squads of legionary warriors poured from others, bolts, plasma, and laser fire adding to the torrent of deadly fire. A second wave of larger craft hit the ground a few seconds later, their armored skin shed by explosive charges to reveal Predator tanks, Vindicator siege tanks, and a dreadnought.
Go, 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 go.
The salamanders parted to allow the Iron Hand's armor to form an attacking lance, pointed directly towards the inner fortifications. Lasers, whirlwind missiles, autocannon shells, and a storm of other ordnance converge on the keep, lighting it with dozens of detonations and slicing beams. A Predator tank slewed to a halt beside REE, and he looked up to see the command hatch in the blocky turret flip open. Helmetless, spearhead Centurion Kratos emerged from the inside of the tank. He raised a fist to his forehead, and then he cupped his hands to shout down over the din of the growling engines and the crash of the Citadel wall falling under the bombardment.
Your flank is secured. Push forward, Lord Praetor. I should not have doubted the strength we gain from righteous conviction. Let us leave a worthy legacy together. My thanks for setting me back on the right path. Deeds endure.
Deeds endure. Oh, that was beautiful. Oh, that was beautiful. I love that. I love that. Kratos, thank you very much. Arya, thank you for reminding him, or for telling him that, the complete saying of the flesh is weak, but deeds endure. Thank you. Oh gosh, that was beautiful. I really thought that, he just decided that he's just going to destroy everything, destroy everyone there, including with the civilians and the salamanders, but no, he came there with dropships, he came there with support. Oh, that was good. Yeah.
You will never trust. You will never dilute your strength by fighting alongside another. We alone are strong. Honorable men are beloved of those who make metals and those who dig holes in the ground for the dead. Iron is unbeholden to honor.
Sergeant Kratos began his bombardment. The World Eater's facility was shielded, but with enough ammunition it could be destroyed from the safety of orbit. An action blocked by the salamander REE with his own vessel. The salamanders numbered barely a dozen, compared to Kratos' over 200 iron hands. The World Eater's recruitment facility was creating more of these tormented Astartes, fit with that abomination the Butcher's nails. The bombardment that Kratos had begun would wipe not just their enemies, but the civilians of this world too, whose only crime was being born to a world garrisoned by a traitor force. The discussions were fruitless. They were meant to be allies, and RE outranked his Iron Hand brethren, but yet they both knew the salamander couldn't do much in the end. Only the shared pain of Istvaan 5 and the bonds of unity had halted Kratos from blasting the object that blocked his guns. RE knew that vengeance had consumed Sergeant Kratos, the one that had consumed all the Iron Hands in the years of the Horus Heresy. Was their Primarch like them? Or were they akin to their Primarch? That characteristic stubbornness, the promise to fulfill the path chosen by any means. Kratos and the Iron Hands despised the traitors more than anything. They would do anything, whatever it took to burn them to the ground. RE counseled Kratos that even now in this war against heresy, that he had to think of the Imperium to come. Of how they would rebuild after Horus is dead. The flesh is weak, Kratos sputtered. The philosophy that had been poured into him like molten metal into a mold. From the black and grey harsh skies of Medusa, all the way to the stars, all those born upon Medusa had endured that harsh environment, the brutal recruitment, and training for a legion in the name of Ferrus Manus, the Gorgon of Medusa. The temperament of the salamanders was alien to Kratos. He could only see his counterpart's concern for this compromised civilian population as foolish, as weak. Ari's humanity here was proving to be a weakness. His flesh was weak. Returning to their vessel with no compromise reached, Kratos awaited for commands he knew he would not obey, though he had no desire to destroy his comrades, but nor would he suffer the World Eaters to live, to recruit. Kratos' patience wore out, and he prepared to board the Salamander's vessel to seize it. Stepping onto the deck with his greater numbers, Sergeant Kratos found that it was he who was outgunned, as he turned to see a dozen salamanders armoured in enormous, saturnine Terminator armour. The ambush had been turned upon itself, as Kratos with shock and then anger, as he knew he was outplayed. Ari and his brothers were going down to the surface. They knew it was their doom, the illogical choice. Once I have annihilated the city after your deaths, it is not the armour or weapons that makes the warrior. It is the spirit. You will fail. Your sentimentality will be your undoing. The flesh is weak. Ari caught him there. What you say, the flesh is weak, is only part of the saying. In forgetting the end, you have lost the meaning. The flesh is weak, but deeds endure. It was a celebration of what Vulcan and Ferret had achieved, and a remark that even Primarchs can die, but what they will do will last beyond their lifespan. It was a message of humility, not condemnation. Flesh is weak, because it knows it must come to an end, and so we must rise above the concerns of flesh, and leave a legacy that others will be proud to inherit. Ferrus Manus understood that. He was a harsh master, an unforgiving ally, but he was also a maker of things, a builder, not a destroyer. The words cut deep. Vengeance had consumed Kratos. All of the Iron Hands, even those who had destroyed their humanity and become revenant machines, the Gola. Ferrus was dead, and all his sons had taken away from his life was only half the picture. The flesh is weak. So Ferrus had spoken. He had never been afraid of death, but of never leaving a legacy. During the Great Crusade, they were building an imperium for a golden age of humanity. Ferrus crafted. He made engines of war, but he also made gifts for those he cared for, such as Fulgrim and Vulcan. The flesh was weak. One day even he would wither and die. So by his deeds he would live on, remembered by the people he had built the future for. The Iron Hands, Medusa, and humanity. Armoured in their saturnine Terminator suits, Ari and his salamanders made planetfall. Like the walking tanks they were, they burst into the World Eater's facility, fire and plasma pouring from the exoskeletal guns. They reaped a heavy toll upon the traitors, but slowly one by one, Ari's brothers began to fall. The mission would cost them their lives, but many others would live as they finally reached the shield generator and destroyed it. Ari looked to the sky, surprised Kratos had even waited before beginning the now targeted bombardment. But the dark silhouettes weren't missiles. Astartes drop pods glowed from the heat of the atmosphere and rocketed down beside Ari. Kratos and the Iron Hands chose the illogical but human choice. They would fight beside their brothers. I should not have doubted the strength we gain from righteous conviction. Let us leave a worthy legacy together. My thanks for setting me back on the right path. Deeds endure. to live by your own convictions and not those of your enemy. That is true revenge. That would be the sons of Medusa's vengeance. The Iron Hands had been shattered, their Primarch murdered, and his corpse a trophy for Astartes that had fallen to creatures of the warp. But even with their weak human flesh, they made the traitors bleed, all taking a toll as Horus plunged towards Terra. The galaxy held its breath as the siege of Terra had begun, the Iron Hands too far away to further influence the outcome. The legends, such as Shadrach Medusan, Bion Henrikos, Cybec Wayland, Amadeus Duquesne, Gabriel Santar, and many others will be remembered as heroes of the Horus Heresy, a time of myth etched into the walls inside Medusa's innermost sanctums. The Imperium had won. Horus had been slain, but the Emperor had been crippled, interned upon the Golden Throne as a carrion lord. The traitors were scourged from the ravaged Imperium, cast into the warp rift known as the Eye of Terror. It would be now that the galaxy would be cursed forever, to know only war. The remnants of the 10th Legion, the scattered warbands finally had breathing room. But before they could become a legion once again, the Primarch Rabute Gilliman unveiled the Codex Astartes. Each legion was broken down into 1,000-man chapters. Never again would one individual be capable of wielding so much power like Horus had, like a Primarch could. The barely few thousand Iron Hands railed against it, even if they knew that after the shattering each cell had grown apart, some embodying the worst excesses of their core philosophy. The flesh is weak. Others who had alloyed with the strength of other legions and tactics that could not return to the old ways. It was with the return of the skull of their lord, the Primarch Ferrus Manus, by Rogel Dawn, that the 10th Legion agreed to the Codex Astartes. The time of the Great Crusade and the Horus Heresy passed from living memory. Millennia fell away like sand in an hourglass, as the Iron Hands fought horrifying Xenos and rebelling worlds across the Imperium for millennia. The legacy of Ferrus Manus, much like the Imperium itself, began to rot. You will never trust, you will never dilute your strength by fighting alongside another. We alone are strong. Honourable men are beloved of those who make medals, and those who dig holes in the ground for the dead. Iron is unbeholden to honour. The time of the Gorgon of Medusa to halt his son's reliance on iron and augmetics never came to pass. All that was left of the wisdom was the weakness of flesh. Eroding with each millennia, the sons of Medusa began to lock away their humanity. Never again would the Iron Hands be shamed by the failures of human emotion. Iron was strong. Iron didn't make mistakes. Iron didn't get angry. Iron didn't care for honor or brotherhood. The Iron Hands aspired to the purity of the blessed machine. Their flesh would decay and rot, but through the machine god and the Omnisire, they would become immortal. It wasn't good enough. His body was weak. He had always known. The flesh had made him resistant to the action required. His encounter with Lideric had provided the final push he needed. He assumed that his friend had returned to his own ship, possibly sharing an orbit somewhere on the other side of the blockade, but in a way that no longer mattered. In the photo-bleached colour blotches that floated out of reach, above his flesh eye he saw the red eyes of Captain Hasrid, closer to him than the ceiling lumens were now. Part of him recoiled from the memory, but he made himself face it. The son of Korax, a death spectre he had later learned, having made inquiries of the cross-scythed emblem with the Commandant's Imager archives, had come upon him completely unawares. If he had been hostile, then Stronos would be dead. Add to that his humbling before the Iron Council and his wayward actions on Thenos, and it showed a pattern of behavior that demonstrated his fault. The Eye was an obvious target. It nagged him for decades, and its replacement was an important step on his drive towards perfection. That it simultaneously deferred actions on the aspirations Lidric had cast against the Adeptus Mechanicus, he had noted and deemed incidental. Any action he might take now would be suspect in any event. For all he had been discomforted at first, he found that he craved the surety of the clan interlink now. He desired the strength of his brother's will to brace his own. The flesh was weak. The bright metal cabinets fitted against the bulkheads rattled as someone entered. His first thought was that it was Haas, wheeling in a Chiricerical trolley, but again his senses fell below expectation. It was Ares. The dreadnought towered over the stowed instrumentarium, the restricted space making his heavy armoured frame appear even more massive. His blocky torso
So what, he was walking inside like a small, corridor or room or space? So he's like, okay, alright.
Pivoted as if to survey the room thoroughly before entering. His optic slits appeared to alight upon Stronos, only by chance.
Is Stronos injured?
Stronos considered the silence, but decided that he could keep nothing from the Ancient.
I am defective. I seek to rectify that.
How so?
The Raven's son proved himself my superior. I must improve and adapt.
Improve and adapt. We recall a time when Iron Hands were less like Christos and more like Cardan Stronos. They were ruthless, yes, but adaptable. Not slaves to calculus.
You should have said as much before the eye of Medusa.
Stronos returned, bitterly, his gaze fixed to the ceiling plating.
Darzik, cast our vote as we saw right. Our word would have made no difference.
When you first stood before me, you declared the Iron Council would feel your wrath for their failure to hold Thenos. Your fury was sound. What became of it?
Such strength of feeling is difficult to hold on to. In time, perhaps. Stronos will know this too.
Stronos scowled. The facial twitch lengthened the visual wavelength, from infrared to microwave. The power conduits buried within the ceiling above his cot became a shadowy smear of crimson.
You believed the decision of the Council to be errant, yet you left the argument to Verox.
From each according to his ability,
said Ares. It sounded like a quotation.
Ferox is passionate and persuasive, even when Tubric wore flesh in place of iron. The Vergan were thought primitive. Now we wonder if they are not the sole champions of the Iron Creed, as once we knew it.
Stronos turned his head to regard the dreadnought. The metal roundels of his forechain bumped against the pallet, and he resisted the urge to touch the augmetic vertebrae, suddenly bitterly angry.
Irrelevant. All of it irrelevant. The Iron Council is ruled. It is clearly our decision-making that is in error, not theirs. I will not weaken my brothers by standing alongside them in this imperfect state.
We feel that we should experience contempt for such self-delusion, yet we find that we cannot care. How far from our father's likeness we have both fallen.
Haas re-entered by another door.
You are beyond my skills to restore, Venerable,
said the apothecary, bluntly, as a headless servitor pushed a Medicaid trolley, and a whippish thing in crimson robe squeezed through the already cramped quarters. The Magos biologist rolled up long sleeves and rubbed his hands with counterseptic jelly, while the servitor maneuvered around Stronos' bedside, its trolley rattling carelessly over the tension.
With respect, Iron Father, your presence here serves no purpose.
He waited a moment, during which Ares offered a blank wall by way of reply, and then added,
You take up space. Leave.
The Christosian question makes all matters subject to doubt.
Stronos said to Ares, voice low.
All will be as it once was, once the arguments are resolved.
Ares turned from the apothecary to him. His emptiness seemed for a moment sorrowful.
Cardan Stronos speaks of the arguments, but what does he know of the question? For there is only one.
Stronos made to formulate an answer, only to realize he had none. Often he had railed against the waste of energy that the Conclave brought on the Iron Council, but had never found the time to learn for himself what, in effect, it was all for. He shook his head honestly. He had been built to be a war machine. This round voyage to Medusa was the first time since his novitation that he had not been either in the thick of a war zone or in transit from one to another.
Better to leave questions of doctrine to the Tech Priests and the Iron Fathers,
said Haas, moving to Stronos' pallet, and the waiting servitor even as he spoke. At the mention of his order, the Magos looked up, but did not interrupt. Stronos frowned at the mortal. For every Iron Hand warrior on Medusa and scattered across the Imperium, there were thousands of servitors, menials and adepts of the Adeptus Mechanicus to service their needs. Noticing his regard, the adept quickly looked away. Stronos found himself wondering what else the unseen legions on which the chapter so depended might see and hear. A non-verbal burst of scorn rang from Ares' vocalizer.
And you call yourselves men of iron, you who cede all free will to others and call it strength. Do you even know how the conclave began?
I know little of Christos beyond his roll of honours,
said Stronos, stung.
I know that he was once considered an exemplar of the Iron Creed.
As it is now interpreted for you, perhaps.
What do you mean by that?
Demanded Haas. Ares did not answer directly.
It began on Columnus.
Everyone knows that,
Haas said, dismissively, then picked up a spoon-headed implement from his Medicaid trolley.
Patience, Kratos, patience, or Strokos, sorry. Patience, yeah.
And bent towards Stronos.
And what happened there to cause such crisis?
Ares countered. Stronos couldn't answer. He looked to Haas. The apothecary let out a frustrated sigh and said nothing, focusing instead on Stronos' eye. He had no answer either.
Stow thy leeches, apothecary. There is to be no bloodletting today.
Ares backed out of the chirurgical bay and into the main space of the apothecarian. With some reluctance, Stronos sat up on his pallet and pushed Apothecary Haas from him.
Come, Cardan. We will show you what happened that day. A day will come when I will strip it from me, lest I lose the power to master myself forever. Already, my legion's warriors replaced their shield hands with metal in my honor, and so they too are learning to doubt the natural strength of their bodies. They must be weaned off this practice before it becomes a mania for them. Hatred of what is natural, of what is human, is the first and greatest of the corruptions.
It is the 41st millennium, the grim dark future where the God Emperor of mankind sits upon the golden throne, a necrocracy to a rotting empire set upon all sides by Xenos and heresy. Upon the world of Medusa lay the Iron Hands chapter, who for over 10,000 years have fought the enemies of the Imperium. Across this world of dark stone and black smog-choked skies, the sons of the Gorgon live in great bastions, fortress cities such as the Gorgon's Forge, a living example to the alliance between the Iron Hands and the Adeptus Mechanicus. Praise be to the Omnisire and the Machine God, the direction of worship for the chapter, as they praise the holy union of flesh and machine. Sergeant Cardan Stronos finally returned to the world of his birth after decades of non-stop war. The muted skies of this bleak world, an all too familiar visage, drained of colour, life, and vitality. His forged chain, an augmetic vertebrae link, each piece showing an acceptance into the various clans of Medusa, a sacred piece of the sons of the Gorgon in the 41st millennium. A neural link to his brothers that left communication to the machine. Hatred of what is natural, of what is human, is the first and greatest of the corruptions. But that,
and since it's one of the first greatest corruptions, there's an avenue for chaos here, isn't there? From that desire to be perfect, I think there is an avenue for chaos to enter and infiltrate their organization. And since they're all talking to each other through their communication link, I forgot what the Amber King just called it right now, but since they're communicating with each other at the speed of light, you know, they're amongst themselves. They just talk amongst themselves. They just do things amongst themselves. They don't have anyone to watch over them. There's no one that they can talk to that's outside of this little grouping of people. And yeah, really, this is just going to be an avenue for chaos to come in.
The wisdom of the Primarch Ferrus Manus never came to pass. For a chapter that had almost purged everything human about them. Stronos found no greetings as his cyber-enhanced boots hit the black sands of Medusa once again, for Brotherhood had rotted away in the millennia, before the machine efficiency of the Iron Hands chapter. Accompanied by the ancient venerable dreadnought Ares, the two traversed to the chapter's innermost sanctums, the Eye of Medusa. At the heart of the planet, inside walls of black volcanic rock, carved with stories of glory, of the legacy of the Horus Heresy, decorated in brutal Medusan steel, the two made their way to the home of the Iron Council. The sight of the guards, the Hellfathers, unnerved even him. Ancient Iron Hands, who had turned the keys of hell. They were machines, barely human, aspects of death that sent shivers down the spines of mortal men. Inside the council's vault chamber, Stronos saw it, a senate of machine and steel. 41 seats occupied by the Iron Fathers and the holy veteran dreadnoughts. Cabling and nodes attached to their minds as they communicated using binary chant and noospheric data blurts, themselves locked into towering iron thrones with spinal plugs and cranial taps, almost like human computers. Stronos and Ares had come to partition the use of full force against the rebelling world within the Medusan system, not knowing that they played a part in a grander debate within the chapter's elite. The Christos question, the proposition of Iron Father Christos himself for the future of the Iron Hands. The debate had lasted for centuries, the Iron Fathers questioning whether to throw away the last parts of their humanity. For is the flesh not weak? Though no longer elected chapter master, Christos had divided the council, the various clans choosing sides as ancient rivalries and deals were struck.
And isn't transforming yourself completely into a machine also heretical? I mean, then you're a cyborg. You're a 100% a cyborg, and I think it is against, the rules and the laws of the Imperium of Man, even the Adeptus Mechanicus, because they're still partly human with machine parts. But you guys want to transform yourselves 100% into machines. I think that's heretical right there.
The Adeptus Mechanicus' influence also evidenced to Stronos and Ares. An endless debate on the interpretation of the will of Ferrus Manus 10,000 years after his death, all rooted in one truth. Stronos lay upon the apothecarian's table. His last human eye had failed him. unable to catch the Deathwatch Death Spectre that accompanied his friend Lidric in their conversations inside the Eye of Medusa. He had also spoken out in anger. He had been emotional during the council's meeting as he decried the clear rigging of Christos and the Mechanicum's vote. He was defective, and so the flesh had to be replaced. The truth of the Iron Hands in the 40th millennium, the truth was that they despised themselves. The legacy of hatred towards their own flesh had rotted within them for millennia. They carved and butchered their own bodies, running away from their own weakness. Ancient Ares remembered a time when they were more like Stronos, a man and machine, still human rather than the cybernetic cold monster that was Christos. A time when Astartes were not dominated by cybernetics and the use of neural inhibitors. Ares began to show Stronos the truth. In the vaults of Medusa, the two bore witness to the events on Columnus, reliving the memory through the recorded visuals of a long-dead battle brother. Through the nauseating static and battle, they saw the truth that was almost erased from history, almost hidden. Iron Father Christos bombarding the enemy and his own men. A cold, tactical choice of a machine that did not have attachment to brotherhood. This was what their self-hatred had wrought. A chapter of revenants, machine dead, that inspired as much fear as any Xenos or monster of chaos. The chapter became divided further. Astronos' actions had drawn the attention of the Christonians faction.
You guys need to clean house. The corruption is settling in too much. You guys need to root it out.
War broke out as two sides battled for the soul of the sons of Ferrus Manus, all leading to the revelations that shook the chapter to the core. The Sapphire King, a demon born from the psychic backlash of the death of Ferrus Manus upon Istvaan 5, had manipulated them.
Well, hello there. That's quite a surprise.
It had fed upon the Iron Hand's self-hatred and desperate need to suppress their emotions. The action in itself an extreme that fueled chaos. Iron Father Christos had been corrupted centuries ago, a pawn to unleash the machinations of the Sapphire King. It had not been a strength to suppress their emotions. They had only bottled them up, compressing them down to the point that they exploded in a violent release. As the chapter engaged in a brutal civil war, Cardan Stronos was struck by the revelation that by cutting off their emotions, his battle brothers were only causing themselves to fall to the corrupting influence of chaos. Their only chance to save themselves was not by cutting themselves off from their emotions, but by embracing them and shackling them to their iron will. The disgusting Sapphire King, accompanied by the accursed Emperor's children and the corrupted Christonians, charged at the surviving Iron Hands. The battle brutal and bloody, Stronos and all of them feeling the touch of chaos, trying to break in and weaken them, to make them push their emotions down, until it exploded. Stronos ordered his chapter, no, his brothers, to release their anger, lest their foes destroy them with it. They were machine, but locked within them was the fury of the Gorgon of Medusa, slayer of Azirnoth, scaler of Karashi, uniter of Medusa and son of the Emperor of Mankind.
That's right.
Their emotions no longer their weakness or shame, but strength. The Battle Brothers disengaged their inhibitor protocols and loosened their furious battle cries. As the emotional floodgates burst open, the Iron Hands turned upon the forces of chaos. Working together with feelings like trust and brotherhood once again in their veins, they outclassed their enemies. The Sapphire King shrieked in rage as they obliterated its form from the material universe. The chapter had suffered numerous losses. Half of the Iron Fathers were dead, and many of their numbers slain by their own hands. But they were pure once more. Our chapter was driven to the very lip of the precipice. We were forced to stare over its edge, into the Stygian depths, into the darkness that awaits us should we ever fall. Yet fall we did not. What saved us from this terrible plunge, brothers? What has proved our redemption? Not logic, not the desperate, dogmatic purge of all things perceived as weak. It were our souls that saved us, and the strength we hold within ourselves, our courage, our choler. It was these qualities which makes us more than just unthinkable steel, that pulled us back from the brink. The path towards perfection was shaped by the gift of failure. Wisdom the Gorgon knew. Electing their new chapter master, Cardan Stronos, the sons of the Gorgon would no longer suppress their emotions. They would conquer it. They would alloy it with the strength of iron, and live a legacy worthy of Ferrus Manus. The flesh is weak, but deeds endure. And to have courage, to at times make not the logical, but human choice, required something the machine could not provide: humanity. Perhaps one day they will choose to strip the metal from them, lest they lose the power to master themselves. But the Imperium, the Omnissiah, and the Emperor of mankind required perfect warriors to destroy the enemies of the Imperium, the sons of the Gorgon, the legacy of Ferrus Manus, the Iron Hands.
I say again, you can never go wrong with Scott Berkeley's music. You can never go wrong. Never. Yes, guys, that is it with Ferrus Manus, the Gorgon, the tragic tale of Ferrus Manus featuring WarriorTier, immersive 40k lore, Iron Hands, made on the Amber King YouTube channel. Yeah, I've got to know a lot about this Primarch and his demise. And of course, we also got to know more about the 10th Legion as they found a way. Yes, it was hard, but they found a way to continue on without their Primarch. And, you know, Ferrus Manus, he wasn't a bad guy. He wasn't a bad guy, really. Compared to his other brothers, you know, he wasn't bad at all. Yes, he had his weaknesses, and he tried to purge weakness from him and his legion, but they couldn't truly understand that in that desire to purge weakness, they were creating weakness within the legion, within himself as the Primarch of the 10th Legion. So yeah, he had his faults, but you know, when I compare him with other brothers that we've seen, you know, like Conrad Kurz and his craziness, or Angron and his descent into madness, bloodletting, really, he is one of the better brothers, if I would say. Ferrus, not Fenris, but Ferrus. Ferrus Manus really is one of the better brothers. He was loyal to the Emperor, and he was loyal to his people. However, like I said before, his obsession with strength and, you know, the purging of weakness made him blindsided to his own people and to the people who you know, worked under his legion, like the auxiliary forces, the human beings. You know, how we would consider them as weak as well, because, you know, they're not physically strong like him, or they're not physically strong like his Astartes. You know, he would look down upon those who he would consider to be weak, which was also a mistake, really. It was a mistake of him and a mistake of the Legion. And he paid for that twice, or should I say 3 times. He paid for it, you know, because of his pursuit for strength and his you know, the purging of weakness. He thought that he could do it alone, in some instances, you know, like for instance when he was fighting against the Elder with his forces on that desert planet. You know, he wanted to prove it, that he could do it, that him alone, he has the strength, he has the capability to do it alone. And he pushed forward, leaving his Astartes behind, leaving the auxiliary forces behind to be killed, and he pushed forward thinking that he can do it alone. Yes, he did survive, but that should have been a lesson that he should have learned from that situation, that, you know, yes, you can be strong, but the weakness that you think is there should not be something that you want to purge, but it should be something that you add and try to adapt around it as a human being. Because there's no way that you can purge all of your emotions. There's no way you can purge all the way your desires or your fears or your hatred for something, or, you know, trying to become something that you're not. There's just no way of truly eradicating that part of yourself. And, you know, Ferrus, you know, it costed him his life the second time around with Fulgrim, when he was fighting against Fulgrim for the second time. It costed him, where yet again he went charging into battle against his brother, leaving his Astartes behind, wanting to prove that he cannot be corrupted, wanting to prove that he's better, wanting to prove that, you know, his strength will lead the way to victory, and that he's not weak. And that yet again blindsided him to the fact that, you know, like I said before, weakness isn't something that you should focus on purging from your life. It's not like that. You can't do that. You should try to always work with it. Try to manage it. Just like with your emotions, don't let your emotions control you. You should be the one controlling your emotions. And that's something that Ferrus and his legion had failed at doing many times over. But after Ferrus died and his legion were at the brink of dissipating because of the different power structures that wanted to assume control over the legion, and even after that situation with Rubute Gilliman, separating the legion into smaller chapters, there was still an issue, there was still a problem with the legion. That this dogmatic thought process of weakness being something that should be purged, and the flesh being weak and replacing it with metallic parts is the path. It's not the path to purging yourself of weakness. It's not. Replacing your body parts with mechanical body parts is not going to make you stronger. Suppressing your emotions and making as if they don't exist also does not make you stronger. It only creates an avenue for chaos to eat inside of you. And that's what was happening with the Iron Hands. Slowly but surely, the different factions on the planet of Medusa were being eaten alive by the chaos. And the Sapphire King, really, he gorged on all of that psychic energy coming from these Iron Hands Astartes who were bottling up their emotions. So, yes, if you have weakness, embrace it. Embrace that weakness. Try to make it your strength as well. Don't shun it out. Don't keep it out. And I like the fact that, there were some Iron Hands Astartes who realized that, being this tough person, being this strong person, and not really depending on others, not working together with other people, is not going to work out. We need to find a way to work with our brothers from other Astartes, legions or chapters. We need to figure out a way to work together in defeating our enemies. And there were some characters like what was his name again? Kratos. Yes, Kratos. When he realized that, he needs to work with his brother is it Area or Ares? Area of the Salamanders. Instead of depending on this dogmatic view of the flesh is weak and the only way to defeat your enemy is with overwhelming force, even if it takes out the civilian population on the planet. That is a sign of weakness right there. That's the sign of desperation, of trying to prove that you are stronger. And he saw that. He understood that that was wrong. And he went down to the planet helping out the Salamanders. That was just beautiful. That was just beautiful. I really did like that. So yeah, Ferrus Manus, the Gorgon, was an interesting character. Yes, he had his faults. And luckily, his legion was able to survive throughout this entire ordeal of losing their Primarch and continuing on with their deeds. Yes, the flesh is weak, but the deeds endure. And definitely the deeds of the Iron Hands are enduring. And they will continue to endure. Yeah. Okay, guys, that is it. That was good. That was really, really good. Thank you again to the Amber King and to WarriorTier for voice acting, and all the other voice actors who are contributing to this content. It was really, really good, really entertaining and informative on Ferrus Manus and his legion. And yeah, thanks again to the person who suggested that I should react to this video. I'm sorry again that I did not write down your name. Remember, I said that if you're watching this right now, you can just tell me in the comment section and, you know, raise up your hand and say, yeah, it was me. I'm the one who requested that you should react to this video. So yeah, it was really good. Thank you very much. And guys, remember, if you want to check out the original video as well as the Amber King's YouTube channel, the links are going to be in the description below. If you like my reaction, please give me a like, comment, and subscribe to my channel. Click on the notification bell if you want to be up to date with my latest videos, and I'll see you guys next time. Okay? Bye-bye.